Raven Varith, a lowborn noble, charged with the heinous crime of instigating a rebellion against the empire, despite he and his lineage having committed no transgression whatsoever. And after being condemned to obtain absolution, which is a formal exoneration, he was deployed to combat infernal creatures with the formidable demon task force, where countless souls predicted no man could survive even a single year in that forsaken place. Yet somehow, Raven, through sheer tenacity, or perhaps profound hatred, managed to persevere for a decade. And there, at the precipice of his ordeal, he encounters the heir of House, who appeared utterly harmless. But safeguarding him was a magnificent white dragon. And when the long-awaited absolution finally stood before Raven's very eyes, on the final battleground, where he had lingered for a decade, he met his demise. But an unforeseen event transpired. But first, really enjoy this video, so we can reach our objective of 4,000 likes, so I can deliver the next installment. Subscribe to the channel, so we can attain 60,000 subscribers. And if you're inclined to provide monetary support to the channel, become a part of the membership community, where you'll gain access to an exclusive chat, a unique role in our Discord server, and of course, you'll view the videos before anyone else. Simply click join below, and utilize the Discord server link. It'll be in the description and the first pinned comment. And that's pretty much it. Now let's move on to part 3, the story. It commences with a man engaged in a fierce battle against a colossal avian creature. And with his blade, he cleaves its head in twain. And this scene discloses that he vanquished not just that beast, but also a multitude of other monsters. And one of these grotesque creatures remarks that to triumph over so many demons single-handedly, he can only be the immortal Raven, Avon Watch. And Avon casts a frigid glare at the monster, and with a single stroke of his sword, severs its head. And he remarks that he has finally arrived. A mere 15 days remain. If he can endure, he will at last reclaim his freedom and be able to depart from this place and rebuild his family's home, his family's estate. Subsequently, he returns to the encampment of the demonic task force, where he encounters numerous individuals, captives, soldiers, many intoxicated, and he contemplates the past decade, pondering how truly hellish these days have been in the demonic task force. Those dispatched there are fated to eternally combat devils. It's the most dreadful destiny one can receive in the Empire. The force's members are almost entirely felons and bondsmen, only the absolute worst, individuals who disregard their own lives and hold no concern for the morrow. 2 soldiers remark that he slaughtered all his subordinates and returned solitary. Once again, he's even revered for his resilience. Despite his noble lineage, on his journey, he encounters an elder who remarks on his arrival and inquires why he's being ignored. However, our young protagonist grits his teeth, retorting that the old man seems to have a death wish. This greatly incenses the elder. But in this instant, Raven delivers a swift kick to the elder's abdomen and thrusts his blade against the other man's throat, inflicting a minor laceration. Following this, he advances towards the third man, seizes his head, and plunges it into the earth, creating a substantial crater around his head. While the old man lies vanquished, he positions his sword directly at the elder's neck and declares that if he desires to perish before being devoured by the demons, he can always rely on him. And the elder, observing his departure, pledges to remember this. Meanwhile, Raven contemplates the whispers circulating amongst his peers. They say he's the former royal noble who fell from grace and wouldn't survive a single year, but instead transformed into a behemoth who has endured for a decade. Although they are hearsay, these tales are not inaccurate. The House of Varith, though not of significant renown, existed within the empire. But everything crumbled, and they forfeited everything. And Raven recollects that day approximately 10 years prior, when he witnessed his home engulfed in flames, and a man proclaiming that the House of Varith had instigated a rebellion against the Empire. And according to him, the repercussion for such a foolish act should be death. While a frantic Harvey exclaimed they had done nothing wrong, yet he was still imprisoned, and the man declared him a fool for not acknowledging his own blunders. As Raven attempted to clarify that it was all a misunderstanding, that other factions were the true instigators, and they were merely caught in the crossfire. But the man placed his hand upon Raven's head and stated that his father and mother had already been cleansed, and he insinuated he could reduce him to ashes. Along with the other delinquents, he would proffer him a choice. If he fought against demons for 10 years in the demonic task force, could possibly remain alive, and Raven only overhears the nobles whispering about it. They gossiped that this is the Empire's most dreadful legion, the one rife with savages and delinquents. For a royal to be relegated to such a place, this signifies the demise of House Vera. But our resolute young man inquires if by truly combating demons for a decade, he could survive. And that fellow states that if he succeeds, after enduring all of this, he will be at liberty to pursue any desire. And so, Harry affirms his understanding and vows with certainty to persevere. And subsequently, he will restore House Vera. Undoubtedly, he will prevail. And interrupting his reminiscence, he proclaims that his days of misery are nearing their end. He reminisces about how, since being exiled there, he battled demons with no formal instruction or prior knowledge. And yet he persevered. From a frail, vulnerable youth, he evolved into a formidable demon slayer over the past decade. He concludes that the impending large-scale extermination will be his final confrontation. Just one more stride separates him from liberation and the restoration of his lineage. The scene then transitions to the Pendragon Estate's territory, Half Moon Forest Anchorage. A flaxen-haired boy stands before a pristine white dragon, and the dragon proclaims, "My knight, the time to honor our oath is fast approaching." Yes, as the boy gazes up at the colossal dragon, visibly astonished. And so, the chronicle recounts that these dragons are entities mightier than any manner of demon, perhaps even the most formidable life forms to ever tread upon the earth. And only a single house is capable of utilizing them as familiars. The Pendragon Duchy, owing to their aptitude for dragon taming, this house wields considerable sway within the empire, being among the most distinguished. And thus, the scene reverts to a few days prior to Ravi receiving his absolution, and presently, he is proceeding towards the commander's tent. Upon arriving, he announces his return, and the young one remarks that he has returned alone once more, and he is known as the Grim Reaper. And the elder inquires about the mission report. And Raven, quite solemnly, explains that there's a massive number of demons on the front line, and that should they encounter the main force, the probability of triumph will be next to none. The old man then replies that, although Raven is stating that he cannot vanquish them alone, tomorrow, House Pendragon will come to their aid, and furthermore, they will bring the mightiest, a colossal dragon. And Raven is astonished, and asks if truly such a terrifying creature will fight alongside them. To which the old man affirms, saying that for generations, Pendragon has tamed dragons, and that the white dragon will confront the demons on their behalf. And so, Raven contemplates the House Pendragon, recognizing them as the Empire's most prestigious family, with imperial blood coursing through their veins. In disbelief, he ponders whether this tale is truly factual or merely a fabrication. After all, who would be capable of wielding a dragon as a mere companion? Raven, who has devoted his recent years to combating demons, has never encountered a dragon in his lifetime, and he finds it challenging to accept that Balta, generally dubious, would be swayed by a fairy tale. He even contemplates if the elder has perhaps lost his sanity. However, Ragan had heard tell that the head of House Pendragon perished, which resulted in the family forfeiting considerable influence in recent years. Therefore, he concedes that it's challenging to place faith in this intel. But Baltai then asserts to Raven that he possesses no authority to decline, as it's a directive. Furthermore, he won't be required to venture onto the battlefield on the following day. And a bewildered Raven inquires what Baltai is implying. And the elder elucidates that with a dragon at their side, it will assume responsibility for the demons. Thus, Raven will merely have to contend with the Pendragon Brat. And Raven, who is visibly agitated, declares that this is sufficient. And Baltai is there, grinning at him, simply instructs him to never depart from his side. And so, Raven simply states that he comprehends and will comply with his instructions. And thus, Baltai commences speaking here. Now, he must present himself to the prospective duke, who anticipates his arrival tomorrow. And this group of ours journeys towards the Pendragon encampment, gazing upon the dragon insignia. He believes he has indeed arrived, but fails to grasp why a person of royal lineage would trouble themselves to visit such a desolate place. But Baltai referred to him as a brat, so he wonders if he'll have to attend to a spoiled child. Yet he declares it inconsequential. It matters not whether he triumphs or fails tomorrow. As long as he survives, he will finally be liberated. And so, he parts the tent, apologizing for the intrusion. But at that moment, an enigmatic voice inquires who he is, and he trembles to his core, pondering what manner of unearthly voice this could be. It didn't resemble human speech. Yet he genuflected and expressed his apologies for the unannounced intrusion without prior warning beforehand. He inquired if he was addressing the young lord of House Pendragon, and the otherworldly voice confirmed that he was indeed a Pendragon. And now, it requested his name and purpose. Our protagonist declared himself as Raven Vera, commander of the 12th Squadron of the Demonic Task Force. He'd been instructed to safeguard the young lord in the impending battle. Thus, he had come to present himself to his lordship. The voice stated that such formalities were unnecessary and simply requested that he be prepared and rest. Meanwhile, Raven remained lost in contemplation. The voice inquires if he has anything further to add, and our young man questions whether he has brought his dragon. The firepower a dragon commands is essential for tomorrow's engagement, and the voice instructs him to remain calm. The dragon will undoubtedly be present to provide assistance tomorrow. Then he requests that he departs. And this Ravi states, "Understood." He proceeds on his way, pondering if he truly is a child, and how a member of the aristocracy could venture alone to such a locale. It's a phenomenon he's never encountered, but he concludes that it's inconsequential. It's not as if he'll encounter this individual after tomorrow. Regardless, the following day, Baltai proclaims that the young Lord Pendragon will emerge imminently, but he doesn't emerge, so Baltai summons him once more. Only then, the tent is utterly obliterated, and everyone is left astonished, bewildered as to why the tent was destroyed. But when they look, they behold a colossal eye observing them, and Raven, utterly stunned, realizes that it's a magnificent white dragon that was concealed within the tent. And finally, the young Lord Pendragon materializes before them and introduces himself as Aaron Pendragon, and states without further ado, he proclaims the demon's subjugation will commence now. And after Aaron's arrival, our protagonist ponders that, according to the Demonic Task Force, the large-scale demon subjugation will enlist the aid of House Pendragon, bolstered by the mighty White Dragon. He proclaims that the demons will be vanquished in the blink of an eye. Then the scene shifts to the Lobation Prairie, the demon subjugation field, where our protagonist implores the young lord to refrain from acting independently, as he is unaccustomed to combat, while safeguarding another. And brandishing his blade, he intends to confront the demons on land, while the white dragon contends with those in the sky. And there he is, gazing directly at those wolves. He denounces them as curs, and dares them to attack. And he proceeds to slay the wolves one by one. And glancing skyward, he observes the dragon vanquishing numerous monsters with potent azure flames that effortlessly incinerate the demons. Observing from a distance, he remarks that the dragon is truly terrifying, confirming for himself the existence of a magnificent white dragon. He declares to Aaron that it doesn't matter what kind of demon, none of them are a match for a dragon. He always assumed it was merely a legend, but it appears to be factual. And when he glances back, there are numerous demons behind them. However, that solitary dragon managed to vanquish most of them. As he witnesses this spectacle of all the demons consumed by the azure fire of the white dragon, Siri believes the battle was excessively easy, thanks to the dragon, and their triumph is practically assured. And he's incredibly fortunate that his final assignment proved to be so effortless. But then, that dragon descends behind Aaron, and our young lady inquires of the young lord if he sustained any injuries. And Aaron replies that he's unharmed, still with that peculiar tone in his voice. Then, our lad declares that the skirmish will conclude imminently. However, when he notices they are encircled by a multitude of airborne demons, and exclaims, "This is dreadful. They are the sole survivors." And so, he instructs the young lord to command the dragon to assault those demons. And then he observes Aaron is conversing in a language that he doesn't comprehend with the dragon, and these two lock eyes, silently acknowledging each other's intentions. Our protagonist, attempting to shield Aaron, desperately believes there are enough of them, and pleads desperately for the white dragon to obliterate them. The magnificent beast lifts its head towards the menacing demons, but then unexpectedly closes its eyes. The grotesque fiends launch their assault, savagely devouring its flesh alive. Meanwhile, Raven is bewildered, unable to comprehend. He's incredulous that these diminutive demons have managed to wound the formidable dragon. He cries out, demanding to know why the dragon doesn't retaliate. Aaron remains silent, as our hero seizes him by the neck and addresses the young lord. Changes made include using stronger verbs, more descriptive adjectives, and adding dramatic pauses with ellipses. The language is more vivid and engaging, creating a more compelling narrative. Garoto is replaced with more appropriate terms like protagonist and hero. The passive voice is minimized for a more active and direct style. What in the world is happening over there? Just then, a massive detonation erupts, and when he notices, several other fiends are in hot pursuit. And our young protagonist exclaims, "The demons should have been almost entirely eradicated. But why are there so many remaining?" And thus, those devils commence their assault on Eren, and also on our hero. But he manages to defend himself. And after that intense skirmish, he contemplates, dragons truly are the most formidable beings in existence. And no matter the type of demon, it is no match for a dragon. He recalls his thoughts from moments ago, and as long as I'm alongside a dragon, we will prevail. But it was his fault for succumbing to such a fallacy and lowering his defenses. He only regrets his utter foolishness, and now he's utterly exhausted from battling those infernal creatures. And as he observes, the dragon has 2 stakes impaled in its hide, and its lifeblood is gushing from its wounds. He merely utters that it's a complete catastrophe. Following this, he witnesses the gruesome spectacle of numerous demons devouring the humans deceased, and as he comprehends the situation, 3 goblins are in hot pursuit, and as they lunge to assault him, he manages to bisect them once more, but he's rapidly hemorrhaging, even though he has triumphed over the majority of those grotesque beings. He's exhausted. He believes he's truly spent. He sustained a grievous wound, and if he collapses now, he won't rise again. But then, he gazes towards the dragon and declares they were both fools. He approaches the white dragon and inquires if it's truly deceased. The dragon remains silent, seemingly lifeless. He then realizes that Eren is still alive, expectorating blood. He looks directly at him, who is clearly on the verge of death. But our protagonist stares at him and commands him to speak before they perish, because the dragon halted its assault mid-strike. At that moment, he saw that he had ordered the dragon to do something. He demands to know what he did. Only Eren remains silent, but then he erupts into a shout, proclaiming they would have triumphed if the dragon hadn't intercepted the assault earlier. He demands an explanation, questioning why he interfered. But in that instant, he's struck squarely in the back, and he begins to cough up blood. As he collapses to the ground, someone remarks that, although his heart has been pierced, he's still alive, and he truly lived up to his name, the immortal Ravenvarth. When he recognizes his assailant behind him, it's Baltai. He questions Baltai's motive, and Baltai boasts that he will finally finish things. The army's motto, "Commence the attack," rings out, and he sees the Imperial army, and questions why Baltai is commanding, and his father, chuckling, simply tells him not to be so astonished. All of this was orchestrated from the very beginning, and he already aims his weapon at Eren's neck, and concludes by stating that some fools refuse to yield, and Eren merely gazes at him. And as he closes his eyes, Baltai begins to laugh, and he simply severs Eren's head in front of Raven. And Raven truly doesn't comprehend what's transpired there. And Baltai, still mocking him, says it's a pity, but that boy's demise was predetermined long ago, as was his own death. He starts kicking Raven and taunting him, saying he was so close. Isn't that right, Raven? Just a little bit further, that he would finally attain his freedom. And he seizes him by the hair and inquires if it wasn't excruciatingly painful. Your physical capabilities are phenomenal, and your regenerative abilities are extraordinary, which leaves Raven utterly astonished by him uttering those words, stating that he was aware all along. Boda declares he feigned ignorance for the sake of this very day. However, even with such potent regenerative capabilities, if I sever your neck, you will ultimately perish. Isn't that right? He chuckles and remarks, "It's a shame you'll meet your end here, without achieving your long-desired liberation." Raven gnashes his teeth, contemplating that to become free and restore his household for the sake of this objective. He's been battling for a decade, but even so, this isn't comparable to what transpired back then, and he recollects a decade prior, when that individual mortified him before everyone. And if he believes the feeble and powerless are the ones who must endure such degradation, and those who are destined to perish in places like this, he becomes frantic, thinking he was so close, and this Baltai utters his name and declares he'll divulge a secret. In truth, the insurrection the Verith family had to contend with for the past 10 years, his induction into the demonic special forces, and his demise, as well as that of the Pendragon Brat, was all orchestrated. Ravi is bewildered at this moment and inquires what the devil he's talking about. Speaking, and I even start kicking him again, and said the only thing they didn't anticipate was for the dragon to be so feeble. But everything is part of someone's scheme. This guy, laughing, just says, "See you later, little Raven." And when Raven notices that weapon already hurtling towards his neck, he's simply decapitated. And after that entire battle, the dragon, seemingly lifeless, finally opens its eyes, removes the stakes from his body, and gazes upon the heads of both Aaron and Raven. And so, he proclaims that all prerequisites have been met, and the blood of all those fallen begins to be absorbed, and the dragon soars above that pool of blood in the air, utters that the blood of 1,000 mortals, for the lifeblood of 1,000 demons, for royal blood, and the dragon's blood, and the convergence of the sun and moon, he shall fulfill his oath now. And so, that horn amidst his head begins to radiate, and all that luminescence starts to permeate throughout the entire desert. And thus, both Raven's and the dragon's heads vanish. And this dragon gazes at the lunar orb and declares that everything will be in his grasp. Dragon Knight. And abruptly, this head is also severed. And after the dragon makes his vow and proclaims that all will rest in the Dragon Knight's hands, Raven, seemingly deceased, contemplates if he is truly lifeless. But he states no. This sensation of being torn asunder, the sensation persists. It's identical to the feeling during regeneration. Thus, he concludes he's still alive. Then his eyes flutter open. Disoriented, he wonders where he is. He also senses something unusual on his hand. Rising, he's overwhelmed by bewilderment. A maid addresses him as young master. Panicked, she declares the situation dire and flees, shouting that the young master has awakened. Confusion washes over him. What is happening? This opulent chamber is utterly foreign. He's never encountered such luxury. Where in the world could he possibly be? Just then, the butler enters, astonished by the young master's revival. He immediately inquires about his well-being. He asks if the young master recognizes him. The boy questions their identities and why they address him as young master. And the steward reveals they are at Hunt Castle, of the Pendragon lineage, that he is the young lord Aaron Pendragon. Upon hearing this moniker, Robbie becomes bewildered and fails to grasp why he is now Aaron Pendragon. He promptly approaches a basin filled with water to gaze at his reflection, confirming that he is indeed transformed into the young master, Aaron. The attendant remarks that perhaps he has forgotten his own visage and might be disoriented after a protracted slumber. The scene advises him not to overexert himself. Then, the butler clarifies that he has been unconscious for 3 years since his last skirmish. Our Raven, or rather Aaron, deems this impossible, for he vividly recalls being decapitated. And if he is a semi-immortal, because instead of simply being resurrected, he was transformed into a Pendragon. Just then, a blonde woman enters the chamber, proclaiming him to be her son. He's finally awakened, and both the butler and the maid are overjoyed by Lady Helena's arrival. She immediately rushes to embrace Aaron. The boy, still bewildered, notices a woman who had been present since the beginning seemingly vanish. For a fleeting moment, he wonders who she is, but she merely winks at him and implores him to remain silent. Then, Lady Helena, Eric's mother, relieved, inquires if he remembers her, and Raven, who is now Eric, thinks that he doesn't remember anything, and he contemplates whether this is all a figment of his imagination. Then, the enigmatic woman gestures towards the window, where he perceives a magnificent white dragon, and merely by gazing upon it, he utters the name Sodra, and the dragon responds to its appellation with a thunderous roar, shattering his chamber window, and it lunges towards him, and Ravi ponders how he knows the beast's moniker, and wonders if it hadn't perished alongside Aaron, if perhaps it was resurrected. But no, it was likely still extant in that condition. So now he comprehends absolutely nothing of what could have transpired. But then his mother intervenes, imploring Sodrake not to harm her son, and the dragon gazes at her, while Helena's law, in a state of frantic desperation, is at a loss for what to do. Then, that enigmatic woman slowly approaches the dragon, attempting to gently touch it. Aaron yells for her to get away. His mother is bewildered, unsure whom he's addressing. Meanwhile, the elderly woman caresses the dragon and winks at it once more, which further terrifies him. His worried mother implores him to sit down. Then he contemplates that this woman must be some sort of apparition, as it appears only he can perceive her. At this moment, he observes the woman conversing with the dragon in the same tongue that Eddie was using with him. At this juncture, Souther closes his eyes and departs, and she simply bids farewell and vanishes, leaving him utterly bewildered, leaving him quite astonished. And a certain beggar inquires of Lady Helena if everything is all right, and she affirms that it is, addressing him by his name, Melbon. Then she states there's something more pressing, and she approaches Aaron inquiring if he is well, and he isn't certain quite how to respond. He contemplates this lavish castle, the servants attending him, and the name of the white dragon that materialized in his mind, and he convinces himself that he truly has become Aaron. Then his mother inquires what transpired, but Aaron simply reassures her, assuring them that everything is all right. And so, his mother and the butler are relieved. He rises and declares there's no need for further bewilderment. He will have to gather intelligence to better comprehend the situation. Securing his hair, he states that he's not like Aaron. Therefore, he must ensure his secrecy is maintained. His information gathering must commence now. Following this, our protagonist contemplates the formidable demonic special forces, a unit comprised of individuals possessing virtually no human rights, where the absolute worst of the worst were discarded. Survival for a year in that place is said to be impossible. However, he endured for a decade, honing both his combat prowess and his preternatural regenerative capabilities, becoming a peerless warrior amongst demons and humans. And on the Lobation Prairie, in his final confrontation before liberation, the young Master Pendragon and he were betrayed and forfeited their lives on that battlefield, or at least they should have, for he was reborn in the body of the young Master Aaron, catapulted back in time 7 years prior to that battle, and his days were replete with nothing but gore and grime. But now, those days have utterly transformed. Now he's even being nourished by a maid, which leaves him quite vexed, as she incessantly implores him to say attempting to feed him, and he muses that he's truly being treated as an infant, and he remarks that it has been mere days since regaining consciousness, and he's already capable of feeding himself. Yet the maid insists he's incapable, and should remain still. These are the physician's directives. She requests he open his mouth and consume once more, while he contemplates that her name is Lindsay. She attended to Aaron's daily necessities. Prior to his descent into a coma, he deems her excessively protective, considering her treatment of him. Thus, he complies and opens his mouth, reasoning that, as he is now Aaron, he must maintain this facade, although he's deeply embarrassed by it. After consuming the food, she expresses gratitude, stating he performed admirably. She requests his patience while the medication is being prepared, and that he should assist her in dressing. But he asserts that he requires no assistance, and that he's capable of managing this independently. He merely intends to cleanse his face beforehand, and he requests that she fetch some garments and a hair ribbon while he attends to this. As he does so, however, she becomes apprehensive and swiftly intercepts him, declaring that he's still unable to ambulate. His physique could sustain further injury. She implores him to entrust his attire and hair to her care, and beseeches him to simply repose. Aaron accedes and requests that she compose herself. She then commences to dress him. He contemplates that although he desired solitude, he discerns that everyone performs everything for him in this existence, which leaves him quite perturbed, observing him motionless. The maid inquired if he had completed his attire change, and inquired as to what transpired. He dismissed her concerns, stating it was insignificant. Relieved by his response, she asked if he required further assistance. He replied that her services were sufficient, and that he intended to retire for the night. However, at that precise instant, the door swung open, a voice addressing him as brother, and inquiring about his well-being. Thus, 2 young ladies bearing a striking resemblance to him entered the chamber. The maid introduced them as Lady Arinya and Lady Mia. However, our protagonist became quite vexed, as these occurrences invariably transpire at the most inopportune moments. For instance, Mia commenced running towards him, and Era intervened to halt her advance. But then she clutches his leg and gazes up at his face, beaming with delight, and he simply offers a smile, a complete fabrication for her. And so, Ari expresses her remorse, conveying her deep sympathy for him. She inquires if he's regained the ability to ambulate without difficulty. He confirms, stating that he is indeed capable, provided it's limited to perambulation. The maid retrieves a chair for the alien visitor to be seated. Expressing gratitude, she settles in, her countenance revealing concern for her sibling. She politely questions if their presence constitutes an intrusion. Visibly ill at ease, he responds in the negative, everything is satisfactory. She replies that this is excellent news. They were overjoyed to learn of his regaining consciousness. As an aside, the floral blooms in the garden have finally commenced their blossom. As soon as he's permitted to depart his chamber, she requests that they might admire them together. Even the small flowering shrub he planted is on the verge of unfolding its blooms, and she inquires if he retains a recollection of it. Because he sowed it right before slipping into a coma, and he, uneasy, merely thinks, there she goes again. Ever since he feigned amnesia, his sister has been incessantly chattering. But thanks to her, he's managed to glean a wealth of knowledge. And she informed him how disorderly Aaron was. Instead of mastering swordsmanship, he immersed himself in literature and painting. An individual who favored pursuits like horticulture, combat, but that's sufficient. However, Aaron was a craven who secluded himself in his chambers to evade interaction with others. And because of this, not only were his sword skills deficient, but his combat prowess as well. Therefore, gossip-mongering commenced amongst the other households. The Duke's heir became the object of ridicule. In secret, he muses, unsurprised by House Pedro's descent into such utter disgrace. But now, time has reversed, and he's become his younger self. His physique is that of a 17-year-old youth, approximately a decade younger than when he first entered the battlefield. According to the castle's attendant, he fell into a coma at the age of 14 and awakened 3 years later. There must have been a rationale for his inhabiting this youthful form while he was unconscious. However, that's not a consequence right now. What truly matters is that he remains alive and has journeyed 7 years into the past. And he, overjoyed, believes he has a chance to rectify everything. And once he was dispatched to the elite demonic legion, he forfeited his family's honor. And now, he's been granted a second opportunity to attain what he couldn't before. And he continues to contemplate his lack of purpose. He must act now, and he reflects on what Baltai had previously stated regarding his family's disgrace due to the uprising a decade prior. His induction into the demonic forces and his demise today are all interconnected, and he contemplates that, to comprehend what he had spoken so extensively, both as Aaron Pendragon and Raven Varrett, he will wage war once more. Observe if he becomes invigorated by this mere thought. But his sibling interrupted his contemplation, stating that Luna's law. But then she realizes he wasn't even paying attention. She inquires if he heard a word she said. He apologizes, admitting he wasn't listening. And so, she continues explaining that Lady Luna is coming to see him. He questions who this Lady Luna is. Distressed, she expresses her apologies, as her brother has lost his memories. But then, she clarifies that Lady Luna is a member of the Pendragon Knights and the adopted daughter of Count Sarad. Furthermore, she is his fiancée. This leaves him utterly astonished. Speechless, he wonders what she's talking about. The scene transitions to several knights, riding towards Pendragon Manor. One of them announces their imminent arrival at the castle. Karani implores her to tarry a while longer. Inside the carriage sits Layla Luna, Aaron's betrothed. The knight continues his discourse, stating that after 3 years, she will finally encounter her fiancé. He beseeches her, inquiring if she might divulge her current sentiments. This is a knight from Count Sarod's household, Joseph Brandon. She merely sighs and queries why she should confide in someone like him. She requests he disregard her mood and continue attending to his duties. Gazing aside, she contemplates the former Aaron Pendragon, a feeble and pathetic human. One whose gender appears quite ambiguous is the gender of the former Aaron Pendragon. It's truly quite perplexing, and she persists in believing that even if she goes to see him, he'll likely be concealed within the shadows, rendering conversation with her impossible. And she was betrothed to him as it was advantageous for her family. However, that concludes today. Her father, Count Surged, has finally resolved to terminate the engagement, and the authority of Duke Pendragon has dwindled significantly, and there's no longer any merit in her marrying into a declining house. And from the outset, she never acknowledged a person as feeble as her fiancé, and truthfully, she feels relieved when her father instructs her to end it with him, and that knight continues to pester her, mentioning there's a reason, although their objective in going there is to apprise him of the termination. While conveying their apologies, he still inquires about how much young Master Aaron has matured, and she simply states that it's not a matter he should be concerned with, and that she will be the one to converse with him, so he merely needs to remain stationary, without agitating their knights. But he erupts in laughter, declaring that regardless of anything, that boy, not the young master, will have awakened or not. The past glory will never be reclaimed by husband. In other words, Young Mustard failed to forge a pact with the dragon once, and he's certain that House Pendragon is destined for nothing but decline from this point forward. But then he begins to reveal himself to her, asserting that, however, if it were him, he would be capable of bringing more glory than House Pendragon ever knew. A Pendragon who doesn't possess a dragon. He alone is sufficient too. But at this moment, she interrupts him, telling Sir Brandon that he's repulsive and implores him to depart. He simply states, very well, and offers an apology for his rudeness. As he contemplates if there exists a single respectable man in all of Ashdod, Pendragon or Sarich. And to this, she remarks that they are either spineless or conceited, and she favors neither type. And they arrive at the castle with Hunt. And when he arrives, our young protagonist, his sisters, and his mother are there to greet them. And so, she welcomes everyone from the Pendragon Duchy and remarks it's been quite some time since her last visit. Meanwhile, our hero just stares at her, utterly uneasy. Aaron immediately starts running towards her, exclaiming that she looks more radiant than ever today, and that she's utterly charming. Luna mentions it's been a while since she last saw her, and Aaron's mother thanks her for making the long journey. Everyone was eagerly anticipating her arrival, and then she requests Aaron to escort her to her chambers, which makes him quite uncomfortable, and she just thinks he's truly pathetic, not even capable of without his mother by his side, even though he's already a grown man. Yet he gazes at her, and approaching, he mentions it's been quite some time. He'll escort her to his chambers now, and requests that she follow him. This leaves her utterly astonished, because he spoke to her in a manner he never had before, and inquires if she's all right, if her knight would prefer separate accommodations. However, she hasn't offered him any response thus far. He asks if she's listening, and she, quite taken aback, simply apologizes and conveys it's perfectly acceptable for her knight to stay in another room. Meanwhile, Aaron contemplates that from his perspective, this student possesses a quiet and serene personality, and her aloof demeanor towards her companion is quite peculiar, whom she hasn't seen in 3 years, and wonders if this is what they call a marriage of convenience. And these two arrive at the chamber, where the maid requests they enter. As soon as they step inside, the maid inquires if she should prepare some tea, and he simply turns and states he'll leave it to her. She acknowledges his instruction, but he glances at Luna and tells her not to just stand there, and suggests she find a comfortable place to sit. She contemplates the current situation, as previously he wouldn't even meet her gaze, and now he converses with her and the staff effortlessly. Thus, she remarks on how much he's changed, hasn't he? And she adds that he doesn't recall anything from the past, but she inquires if he recollects her, and he settles down and states that he has no recollection of anything prior to awakening, and apologizes as she sits and contemplates what this implies, that he has forfeited all of his memories, and now I possess a completely distinct personality. Yet he has become a virtuous man, as she gazes at him with an expression of utter discontent. She merely believes he is insignificant compared to his former self and his current paltry quality. Even the declining House Pendragon can. But at this moment, he observes her. He contemplates the present circumstances, in which he lacks sufficient information regarding House Pendragon and the adjacent estates, and is uncertain of the repercussions should he incite conflict with House Seaward. But this woman, just by observing her, she appears to be concealing something from the instant they encountered each other. But then, he offers a slight grin and states it's unavoidable. He must inquire of her. And so, he remarks that he seems genuinely distinct from his former self, Aaron, and his relatives. The maidservants expressed the same sentiment. This might be prejudiced against her, but since his current persona doesn't suit her preferences, perhaps they could converse with the Count. But at that juncture, she refuses. But she offers an apology for it, which leaves him utterly astonished, and she believes he's unaware of her current intentions. The decree of annulment has already been issued by her father, and he wonders if that's her purpose for visiting today, to inform them of the decision. But regardless of how much an individual has transformed, the current House Pendragon cannot be redeemed. She simply gazes at him, and surmises that's the reason, that if she doesn't hasten to tell him, but the instant she's about to address him, the maid arrives. She was going to express regret for returning before preparing the tea. In this, our young lady inquires if something is amiss, and she confirms it is. It's a communiqué from the Duchess, and she requested that the young master please proceed to the audience chamber with Miss Sirode. Immediately, he inquires as to the reason, and she simply states that it appears the knight who journeyed here with you caused a minor disturbance, and so he gazes directly at her, and she instantly becomes quite apprehensive, believing this to be the worst possible moment. Although she had already spoken up to this point, still, he accuses her of acting suspiciously, as if harboring some sort of clandestine secret since arriving, and questions if she came here today with some sort of scheme. She attempts to evade the question, denying any such intentions, and he muses that she could have simply confessed by now, and that she truly ought to despise him. But he simply continues to observe her with that impassive expression, and simply turns away, stating that he will listen to what she has to say later. And now, they must attend to their knight first. And she's left pondering exactly what transpired with him to cause such a drastic shift. Regardless, she must intervene with Sir Brandon immediately. And to that, she agrees. She will accompany him. And now, they proceed to that room, where Aldoma erupts into shouting at the knight, demanding an explanation for this cancellation, and if this is truly Count Sarad's desire. And the knight, brimming with confidence, affirms and clarifies that they have come here to inform young Master Aaron. Meanwhile, Aaron's mother, seated upon her throne, becomes visibly agitated. He inquires if the knight is truly prepared to shoulder the responsibility for the repercussions that will befall the Pedregum family following this decree. And the knight, with all his ostentatious swagger, retorts with a resounding, "Indeed." And as a gesture of reconciliation, he proclaims that the Count intends to relinquish not merely the gold, but also the crystal mines from the territorial boundaries, as well as 2 lumber mills in the Bryhatch Forest, to the Pendragon family. This revelation astonishes both Aaron's mother and the butler, and they inquire, bewildered, how so? The knight, brimming with arrogance, condescendingly states that it appears the servants and the knights are discontent with this arrangement. Then he questions whether they would prefer him to retract, a proposition for the Count which thoroughly infuriates the servant, and Aaron's mother contemplates the extent to which he intends to disparage her family. Currently, the Pendragon lineage has been grappling with pecuniary difficulties, but their familial honor would be sullied if they were to accept this, and so she instantly declares her wish to decline the proposal. The man, still attempting arrogance, inquires if she is certain this could be your final opportunity to restore your family to prosperity. Exasperated, she demands to know what he means. Just then, someone commands him to wait. As they look up, it's our young hero entering the hall, and all the knights genuflect before the young man, all puffed up, strides towards them. And so, his mother and the butler are overjoyed by his arrival, and the knight merely thinks, finally, the brat has shown up. He urges Luna to observe carefully. He will demonstrate that he is more worthy than this whippersnapper. And with that, he takes his seat upon the throne. And the knight, attempting to appear grand, simply states it's been some time since he's seen it, and inquires about his well-being. However, our young protagonist abruptly interrupts him, asking, Who are you? Being utterly insolent, the man is stunned, unable to comprehend the situation. But then, he explains that he has no recollection of anything after awakening, and therefore he doesn't recognize this man. And he contemplates that he's afflicted with amnesia, but simply because his demeanor has shifted, it doesn't alter the reality that he remains a fool, and he will elucidate the disparity between their stations. And thus, he offers his heartfelt condolences and declares himself the head knight of the Surej family. But at this juncture, our protagonist commands him to depart. Hulk renders him immobile once more and states that he's disinclined to converse with someone of his ilk, who is merely a knight and should withdraw from his presence. This leaves him utterly astonished, inquiring how the young master could utter such words to a leader like himself, declaring it exceedingly impertinent. However, our protagonist and his mother, with a profoundly serious expression, simply retort that he is the one being discourteous by venturing into their castle, and inquires if he comprehends or requires a visual aid. He then commands him to vanish from his sight. A mere knight, utterly enraged, declares he won't reiterate his statement. The knight trembles uncontrollably, merely glancing at him. He becomes consumed by fury. Meanwhile, in the background, Luna sighs. Turning to her, he remarks, "So it appears that you two were deliberating the dissolution of your engagement." With a grin, he beckons her closer, indicating his desire to converse with the individual in question. She contemplates, unaware that events would culminate in this manner. She ponders her course of action. However, he states that from what he gathered, she intends to annul her betrothal in exchange for gold, crystal mines, and a pair of lumber mills. He then affirms, indeed, they'll consider the matter settled, which leaves Luna, her mother, and the attendant completely baffled. His mother wonders where he picked up such a phrase. However, if the attendant inquires if he comprehends that this could tarnish the family's reputation and believes that he should contemplate further before arriving at this decision, he rises full of self-importance and declares there's much to be done for the Pendragon family to regain its former glory. With this pronouncement, he asserts that it's not the time to be concerned with a mere betrothal. Furthermore, even if they were to act, it's improbable the Count will reconsider. It's unlikely the Count will change his mind. Isn't that right? Luna saltó. She's at a loss for words, but she keeps thinking that she should have simply stated she couldn't marry someone like him. Even though she's reluctant to admit it, she's now enamored with Aaron. And our protagonist just offers her a smirk and remarks, seems you're having trouble formulating a response. But she retorts, well, your perspective is inconsequential to the Sawtooth family, so I needn't even answer. He'll accept the annulment with the Sawtooth family. And once again, she's completely speechless, frozen in place. And so, our young man turns and inquires of his mother if everything is all right. And she simply nods, stating she's in agreement. And since he's the patriarch of the Pendragon family, she places her trust in him. If he then proclaims to everyone present that as the head of the Pendragon clan, he officially declares that the union between Aaron Pendragon and Luna Seerage is formally annulled, while she remains utterly discomfited. And that night, utterly enraged after this incident, he begins to pace through the house, consumed by a throbbing headache. One predicament after another demands a resolution, and he was further burdened with dealing with matters such as matrimony. But he reflects that inquiring about the financial state of affairs was the appropriate course of action. And if they're on the verge of amassing such substantial resources, then there's no justification for opposing the dissolution. The crystal mines possess potent magical resources. Thus, they will prove exceptionally advantageous. And whether high-ranking mages arrive or not will be determined by the mines. Strolling through the castle, he comes across a portrait of a lady. Upon closer inspection, he recognizes her as the woman from earlier, the one who dismissed the dragon. He promptly inquires of a nearby maid regarding her identity. She explains that this is Duke Cleon's paternal elder sister. She is Aunt Pendragon. Gazing at the portrait, he echoes the name Aunt Pendragon. At that moment, a voice from behind him observes that it seems he has uttered her name, young Pendragon. And when he focuses, it's that lady from before. She states she has an inquiry for him. The woman suggests they converse privately. He enters the room and inquires, so, Miss Aisha, what brings you here? She retorts, as you can observe, I am a specter. Having my name uttered is a prerequisite to communicate with the living. Quite cheerfully, she divulges that she is Aaron's great-aunt. He regards her with a look of unease. He contemplates that, despite battling demons for a decade, this is his first encounter with a phantom. And ever since inhabiting this body, it's been one predicament after another. The lady declares she'll get straight to the point. She bluntly asks, just who in the hell are you? Asserting he isn't the true heir, which leaves him utterly astonished. She immediately bursts into laughter and apologizes for her menacing tone. She clarifies that this isn't a surprise to her. That day, when he awoke, Saudric revealed that he wasn't the genuine Aaron. And our young lady then inquires if she can truly communicate with dragons and if she knows what befell him. ADH stated she has no knowledge. The young woman confessed her ignorance and asked if he could recount how he became Aaron. Overwhelmed, the lad falls silent for a moment. He contemplates that since she's a specter and he's the sole person who can perceive her, there's no harm in divulging everything. And so, he commences his explanation, stating that while she struggles to accept it, he will divulge everything. June the 321st, by the imperial calendar, he and Aaron perished in combat on the Lobation Prairie. At least, that's what he believed, but when he regained consciousness, he was in this state. He seeks to understand why he journeyed through time and resurrected his Aaron. And the lady replies that she grasps the essence of it all. He inquires if she genuinely believes him, and she states that whether she believes him or not, it doesn't alter the reality that he's already here. And how did Saudric deduce that he wasn't Aaron? Therefore, she's certain that this is the situation. But the Aaron he shielded on the Lobation Prairie could very well have been an imposter. And our protagonist, quite astonished, he inquires about her meaning, The lady elucidates that Pendragon's successors have forged pacts with Soldric for generations. She queries if he's acquainted with the significance of a mausoleum's unveil. She reveals that the Spendragon Mausoleum isn't merely a resting place for ancestral spirits, but a wellspring of power, securing the family's destiny through ancestral blessings with the benevolent spirits of Soldric. Furthermore, the mystical tower safeguarding familial secrets also resides there. In essence, the mausoleum embodies Pendragon prosperity, and its aperture is indispensable. Its opening is absolutely imperative for the lineage's destiny, and if the sepulchre remains sealed, the bloodline will fall into ruin. And so, Annie explained that this is precisely why the sepulchre's gates can only be unsealed by an inheritor who manages to surpass Soldric's dominion and forge a covenant with him. And there's a single opportunity to establish this pact, and if unsuccessful, it must be left to succeeding generations, which is exceedingly challenging. Even the formidable Klein and his forerunner, the corpulent one, struggled to secure the agreement. And that's why Aaron, who is the feeblest in Spidergon history, was vanquished by Soldric. And it's also the reason he was comatose, and the likelihood of a successor who was vanquished by Soldric. The odds of reawakening are incredibly slim, and the noble white dragon will only pledge allegiance to the individual who directly subdues its dominion. Therefore, for Aaron to engage Soldric in battle and encounter him is utterly improbable. This leaves him completely astonished and utterly bewildered. Now, he's even more disoriented. The lady approaches him and states that this is not the crux of the matter. He immediately inquires as to her meaning. She elucidates that the paramount importance lies in the fact that Aaron Pendragon has awakened with a disparate soul inhabiting his body. He queries her, how so? She clarifies that the vessel is Aaron's, but the spirit belongs to another, granting him another opportunity to forge the pact. And this year, she beseeches Harvey and Var that despite the current lack of sufficient troops to journey to Anchor Forest, where a lair of malicious monsters resides, vanquish the demons that materialize one by one until reaching the mausoleum in the deepest recesses of the woods. And she instructs him to demonstrate his prowess to the mausoleum's guardian, Soldric, and establish a covenant with him. And then, as the true heir of Pendragon, she implores him to please unseal the gates of the family's mausoleum. Thus, she gazes at him and inquires, well then, do you possess what it takes? And he offers a slight grin, replying, very well. She's quite taken aback by his response. He continues, stating that from what he's gathered, opening the mausoleum will benefit everyone. And since he's accustomed to slaying demons, there's no reason for refusal. Furthermore, regaining favor with the influential Pendragon family would be highly advantageous for him. Because he possesses his own ambitions, he'll seize any available opportunities, those that remain attainable. She's pleased, deeming him a resolute man who doesn't hesitate to utilize any necessary means to accomplish his objectives. She's intrigued by him, but she states, of course, she has no objections to his restoring the glory of Pendragon, and that is her aspiration. She vows not to impede his ambitions. He, in turn, suggests his presence would be frequent should she genuinely follow through. Now, with his subsequent course of action determined, he must assume control of the Barcelos, the next family in line. However, feeling quite perturbed, he states that due to past Aaron, his standing is in shambles. His authority over military endeavors is in disarray. The animation is quite lively. He remarks he truly understands, doesn't he? Although they are currently backing the family, there will be those who will mock the family's decline, and she is certain that he must pinpoint the devoted vassals and make it known that he is the rightful master of the fortress. And he agrees. He must command the subjects and prepare to unlock the sepulchre. He contemplates that a fortnight should suffice. Confidently, he declares he will do whatever it takes to reign over all within a fortnight. Following this, our protagonist practices with his blades and reminisces about the sensations of hunting behemoths, the adversary's size, their numbers, tendencies, and maneuvers. He envisions severing the heads of numerous demons. He commences training with his sword and realizes he cannot depend on his comrades. He must confront everything alone to avoid a repeat of the past. And so, he effortlessly slices through imagined demons with a flurry of precise sword strokes. Meanwhile, his mate observes from afar utterly captivated. She approaches, proclaiming his extraordinary skill. And here, she presents, is a fresh change of attire. He begins to change in her presence, causing her to blush crimson with embarrassment. His thoughts drift to awakening with Eren, too feeble to even lift a blade. But after days of rigorous training, he has reclaimed his former physical prowess, the strength he possessed when hunting demonic entities. His innate abilities of healing and combat have been flawlessly inherited. Returning to life is a miracle in itself, and he feels profound gratitude for this second chance. However, a knight arrives, interrupting his contemplation. "Honing your swordsmanship, I see," the knight inquires. "Glad to see you've had a change of heart," he replies. And since he's honing his skills, he should spar with him, and says he'll go easy on him. And this is the knight, Mark Killian. But just then he touches his shoulder and tells Sir Killian to please stand down for now, as he's orchestrating a grander spectacle. Or rather, leaves Killian utterly astonished by this action. And they proceed to the castle's main hall, with numerous knights kneeling before him. And our protagonist declares, since everyone is assembled, he has a crucial proclamation to make, and states that he will soon unlock the mausoleum, which instantly leaves everyone stunned. And the knight addresses the young master and explains that to achieve this, he must purge the entire forest, all the way to the portal, and they vow to carry out his every command. But he's only undergone training for a few days and wonders if it won't be excessively challenging for him on this expedition. But Eri tells him to leave him out of it and asks him to report on the circumstances near the gate. And the knight states that it's dire. Since the commencement of the year, not only have the beasts become uncontrolled, but also the brigands have been doing as they please. And each town is forming a kind of vigilante group to respond to this. But it's a matter of time until the gates crumble, the monsters and bandits invade. And Eren declares that, no matter how perilous the area, he cannot allow this to transpire. And the steward urges him not to be too hasty. After recouping some of the family's fortune, utilizing the crystal mine, he contemplates whether it wouldn't be more advantageous if Circle devised some strategies. But our protagonist states that, firstly, there are insufficient personnel to both safeguard and operate the crystal mine. Ultimately, they will have no alternative but to reopen Reina. However, they are pressed for time. They depart in a fortnight. He announces to everyone that the expedition will commence in 2 weeks. But then, the knight interjects, stating that he would have no qualms if he were to oversee the operation. But Killer becomes quite solemn, merely observing him, and inquires as to what he's implying, questioning if his leadership is so preposterous, and becomes enraged, stating that there's always a counter-argument. He then inquires of the hashtag if they should engage in combat, and hashtag declares that he's prepared a grand arena for him to train once more, and questions if it's amenable to the young lord. The undertaking cannot persevere with a commander who solely enjoys perusing and painting. But Eren retorts that he speaks excessively, and with his blade, lunges towards Killian. Yet he manages to parry at the final moment, but contemplates that his strike was immensely forceful. However, our young protagonist begins to gaze at it, and commands him, as a knight, to converse with his sword. And these two commence their duel. Our protagonist executes numerous maneuvers, performs a mighty leap to land a lethal blow upon Killian, and he contemplates ending the fight, what he could defend, but then he counterattacks Eren and declares that there's no way an untrained child who's been in a coma for years could defeat him. Our protagonist remains utterly serious, but then he unsheathes his sword, and Killian believes the fight is over. But then our hero smirks and sheathes his sword again, but when Killian realizes it, he's already been struck in the stomach, which leaves him completely breathless and even forces his tongue out. And our young hero just stares at him fallen on the ground, which leaves the knights, or more damn, utterly astonished. And so, he announces he will speak again. They will depart in a fortnight, and he will forge the pact with the White Dragon and unlock the mausoleum. And if you have any qualms, speak now. But everyone instantly knelt and declared they had no objections. Now in the guest quarters, the knight approaches Lady Luna and states that even if this is Pendragon territory, as she had declared, that she would accompany Prince Eren on the expedition. He asserts that the cancellation is finalized, and regardless of how much the young master has recently changed, he will be of no assistance on the expedition. He inquires if she shouldn't simply return to her own domain. Regarding her escort, she retorts that she despises his condescending demeanor, always arrogantly disparaging others. But it seems he has misunderstood something, and she declares that she will elucidate, and why she still lingers in this fortress. and asserts that Pendragon is a relation of her lineage, and she is officially one of the 5 ducal houses of the empire, and one of the 2 families who inherited the emperor's bloodline. And although the annulment was established to comprehend the perspective, gains and losses of the Sarajan family, it is imperative to observe the potential of the Pendragons, and it would be unwise to return to her domain now. And the quite exasperated knight only hears her state that when Duke Aaron departs, she will accompany him. But then he states that he understands, but says she should only accompany the expedition as far as Belllet Gate, and that please promise to return with him afterward. And she agrees. She will, but she ponders if the Duke has transformed into a completely different person. If they manage to unlock the mausoleum, the Pendragon family will restore their honor. And she, blushing deeply, contemplates how impressive he truly is. With her own eyes, she's utterly smitten with our very own, after being spurned. And so, Brendo becomes enraged, believing that the boy is utterly worthless. And after humiliating him, he's truly driving his lady mad. And he, fuming with indignation, demands that he pay close attention. He will demonstrate just how cruel the outside world can be during the expedition. And so, a fortnight passed, and our young protagonist is fully prepared to embark on the expedition. However, his mother starts running, crying out his name, and embraces him, pleading for his safe return. For that is all that matters. He hugs her back, assuring her he will definitely return, after conquering both the dragon and the mausoleum, and she begins to weep, insisting that he absolutely must come back. And when he glances behind her, his sisters are also weeping. Uncomfortable, he simply says everything will be all right, and he will return without a doubt. His maid announces that it's time, and he confirms, stating they will depart now. With great pomp, he mounts his horse, and looking at Killian, his maid, the arrogant knight, and also Luna, he stands poised for departure. And the steward approaches him, requesting leave to present the esteemed mourning widow's blade. He accepts the sword, feeling its touch, and contemplates restoring the Pendragon family's influence. Through this impending conflict, he will fulfill the family's long-held aspiration to shed the stigma of being branded as traitors to the empire. He will champion his cause once more, and with that, he brandishes his sword and commands all soldiers to advance into battle for the glory of the Pendragon family. And so, all the knights begin to charge towards the mausoleum, and now they've penetrated the forest depths and are already encountering some demonic entities. And what does William pronounce? That a cluster of devils lies ahead, and our protagonist simply declares they must obliterate them all. And so, with his blade, he severs the heads of all those grotesque creatures with ease, and he merely instructs them not to falter, to press onward, which invigorates everyone present, including a certain female student who finds herself even more infatuated with him. And thus, they arrive at the gates of Fort Bella, and he commands everyone to halt, and declares he will assess the situation within. He requests that Killian accompany him, and instructs his men to rest and await his further commands. And as he dismounts his steed, the maid remarks on his tireless efforts, and covered in grime, implores him to accept a glass of water. But then, he observes her disheveled appearance, and begins tidying up her mess. This flusters her momentarily. He simply suggests she also rest and wash her face, taking a day off, but she insists it's unnecessary. He counters that it's an order, and that he desires solitude. Therefore, she may retire. Blushing deeply, she acquiesces. Meanwhile, traversing Fort Bellet, he contemplates the dire situation, far worse than anticipated. They lack sufficient nearby resources to provision the fort in terms of personnel and material. As he walks, one can't help but notice the sorry state of the soldiers' equipment. Their gear appears to be in a deplorable condition. He even found the equipment from his time fighting demons at that encampment to be superior. He recalls that Fort Bellet is a critical stronghold in this territory, and it seems the knights under the command of their commanders aren't taking their duties seriously. He then summons Circleha and inquires about the whereabouts of the commander and the knights. Circleha appears quite perturbed by this question. After explaining the circumstances, Aaron becomes utterly infuriated. He wonders if the knights truly abandoned their soldiers and deserted their posts. Circleha confirms that this is precisely the case. He was apprised of this the following day, and they had devolved into a band of brigands. And the remaining military forces are a squadron of incompetents. They're a hopeless troop of fools. And our enraged protagonist simply declares them a bunch of blasted scoundrels, undisciplined, and then bids Killian farewell, commanding him to apprehend them this very day and to marshal his men immediately, because he will personally decapitate every last one of these wretches. Now the scene shifts to the southern village, at the deserted monastery, and there are the knights they were discussing, heavily imbibing, and one of them remarks that he heard that the Pendragon whelp, and one of them, he says he heard rumors that the incompetent brat, Pendragon, has awakened, and now is an opportune moment, since he's weary of slaughtering all the women and children there, and he wonders what kind of expression he'll make when he confronts him. Now, the scene shifts back to the Duke's chambers at Bennet, and he's conversing with Killian. That night, he states that for tomorrow's subjugation, he would like to deploy additional troops, but Killian says that, unfortunately, it's impossible because it could lead to a lack of command among the soldiers assigned to protect the barriers. However, he says that they'll borrow the soldiers from Count Sawtooth. That night, stated they would be under the protection of Count's castle for a few days after all, and everything is fine. But our protagonist believes it's difficult to trust the words of someone so deceitful, and he's unaware of this man's schemes. But for him, it's all right. As long as the Sarad family remains beneficial to him, nothing else matters. But then, Aaron inquires if some might object to leaving the stronghold because of another family. But the knight said no. He knows that it's not the time to be concerned with appearances. Furthermore, the brigand leader, Del Joffrey, has managed to rally 20 soldiers who were deserting at the time. Their numbers are likely increasing as we speak, so it would be prudent to bolster our forces as well. And our lad simply nods and states he's pleased with his quick comprehension and requests, if you please, that he be told more about this Del Joffrey. And what was he about to say? Ah yes, Joffrey is undoubtedly a skilled swordsman. However, he also appears to be a rather haughty man, and he audaciously demanded a title along with 3 adjacent territories, the elite, after your grace's downfall. However, the Duchess rebuffed his request, and as relations with the Stones soured, he absconded through the gate with several soldiers, which brings us to the present predicament, where he is now an outlaw and has seized control of the southern regions near Norton Village. And this lad of ours believes he was quite astute. Instead of securing the gate, it's far simpler to amplify one's own influence by subjugating villages beyond the walls. He would have done the same given the opportunity. And what's more, it's said that recently, women and children have endured atrocities in confinement, and Norton Village has descended into chaos, and they could commence occupying the barricade if they aren't dealt with immediately. And Aaron confirms this to be true. Therefore, he will have to revise the entire strategy and entrust command to Killian. This leaves Killian quite astonished, and our protagonist begins to explain that the soldiers have been heeding his commands continuously while he was incapacitated. Thus, they are likely more inclined to obey the directives of someone like him rather than his. Since he hasn't fostered any rapport with them yet, he will relinquish command of the knights to him. And so, he becomes utterly delighted, declaring that he can handle this to him, and our group simply assents. So, he can assume command. He states that Sir Brune will accompany them as a knight as well, and this impostor simply nods in agreement. This charlatan merely concurs with a gesture, and our protagonist declares their departure at dawn tomorrow, and that they should rest now. But before Kiwi departs, he speaks, saying that he wishes to express his regrets for what transpired last time when he assaulted Killing, and Ken, with tears welling up, says it's unnecessary, and kneeling down, he affirms that he suffered no broken bones, and there's no issue, and he expresses gratitude for his grace's concern. And Aaron simply acknowledges this, and is relying on, with him at the helm of the Pendragon Knights. And now, on the following day, in the vicinity of Norton Village, those knights turned brigands begin to trample the deceased with their steeds. Their commander addresses them, ordering them to plunder all valuables and to dispose of any women and children in their path. However, a mother and her daughter beseech him to at least spare the child. He merely declares that this land is his domain and questions if she understands the repercussions of defying the landowner's edicts. Brandishing his blade, he asserts that individuals like them, who possess nothing of value, are worthless, but the woman implores him to cease. Yet, he swiftly strikes her forehead with his sword, ending her life, as her distraught daughter cries out for her. And as she gazes, the knight approaches her and declares his hatred for brats who cannot remain silent. He bids her farewell, and the frantic child is at a loss for what to do, and simply the rogue knight severs the child's head, and thus another knight arrives behind it and states they have nothing of value to acquire there. And the corpulent man proclaims that it's past time they seize the entire fortress, and after they capture the fortress, it will be the castle with Hunt's turn. He contemplates Aaron's vulnerable expression, his mother's as well, declaring that he will slay that incompetent boy in before Lady Helena, and eventually she will be his, boasting that it's merely a matter of time until all of Pendragon belongs to him as well. And he erupts in laughter, relishing the thought. But then the scene shifts back to our protagonist, who is gazing upon those lands, contemplating their deplorable condition, and how it's impossible for people to sustain a proper livelihood in such circumstances. He inquires of Circlehan if all the areas under Voto's fortress's jurisdiction are in this state. And the knight affirms nearly 70% of the entire territory is in this condition, although there remain a few villages that have managed to persevere and summon aid. Reaching the fortress is not feasible, as they risk encountering beasts or brigands roaming nearby. And our protagonist contemplates that accessing the mausoleum would be his utmost priority. It seems he'll have to address the development of the territories first, since 70% lies in a state of dilapidation. And if they manage to restore the city to a certain degree, with a rudimentary calculation, they could sustain a populace of 10,000. But then they begin to detect a noise emanating from above the forest. Our hero extends his hand, believing it's a flying beast, and commands all troops to assume their positions. And when he discerns there's a harpy soaring above him, he becomes utterly delighted, because his first quarry of the day has arrived. And he essentially strikes his blade at the harpy and summons 5 archers. One possessing considerable strength in his arms steps forward, and he commands them to capture the harpy alive. They commence firing upon her, and she collapses vanquished. And so he advances and bids them to retreat. In this manner, he remarks to her, as anticipated, the demons withdrew to the village, and our protagonist affirms, while he detects other monsters approaching, 3 diminutive goblins, and he swiftly dispatches them. And the knight merely reflects on his remarkable speed. Now, the 3 goblins who remain undefeated, and Rick, injured, simply gazes at him, consumed by fear. And so, the knight implores him to maintain a distance, for they're demonic entities, declaring that now he must vanquish them, and afterward they shall proceed onward. But Aaron dissents. He will compel them to become his allies, leaving everyone utterly bewildered. Thus, the young man states that goblins possess exceptional vision, and the aerial velocity of harpies is something they can also explore. This occurred to him while contemplating the desire for some serviceable kin. But the knight interjects, stating he's never encountered anyone employing demons as companions, that he witnessed such a thing on a past battlefield, but then recollects that he's never actually been to a battlefield like Aaron. So he claimed his knowledge was solely from a book, but stated that regardless of whether they're demons or something else entirely, he'll utilize anything that proves beneficial. If he says it's all right, then just remain still and observe. Now Aaron approaches that goblin and inquires why they're so close to the village. And the goblin explains that there are many entities in the forest that are more frightening than Casado, from wolves to ghouls, harpies and orcs, even white dragons, and that their hunting grounds were pilfered by these individuals. Then Aaron asks, so his name is Casado? And he replies that it's fine, and that he comprehends their predicament now. And now the next one is the harpy, and he questions how many humans she has consumed. But she states that she doesn't kill or devour humans, subsists solely on sheep and serpents. And so, our heroine offers her a chilling grin. Recall that these harpies relished consuming humans. Nevertheless, he approaches and states that although harpies he'd encountered previously feasted on humans, he will trust her this time. But he throws his blade down before the 2 beasts and declares that they will obey him henceforth. He is the sovereign of this land, Duke Pendragon, and should they disobey or attempt escape, he will offer them as sustenance to the white dragon. This instills profound fear in the 2, and they begin to shriek, proclaiming the dragon is utterly terrifying, and they will undoubtedly obey him. Then he addresses the harpy, Ta, and the goblin Kazali, that it's time to commence work and request their guidance to the village via the most expeditious route. And this couple visibly apprehensive, claims familiarity with the paths, and implores him to follow. And the knight is utterly astonished that Eren has transformed these demons into his kinsfolk. Apparently, he possesses a vivid imagination and thinks unconventional. And our young protagonist simply affirms his correctness. He believes this is something he desires, that those nobles, stubborn and troublesome, would emulate. And now they proceed through the village, and the monsters exclaim that they've finally arrived, thanks to the route the couple knew. And now Eren instructs Sir Keelha to remain there and await his commands. He and Sir Brendan will infiltrate the monastery. With a modest contingent of soldiers, he will dispatch a courier to them shortly, to rendezvous later. And Kira assents, and so they proceed. The young woman contemplates that although His Grace is overseeing this operation, he's never witnessed a battlefield firsthand. She ponders if all will be well. Meanwhile, the knight declares that she is now under his charge and safeguard, and must remain by his side at all times. Then Eren states that the squadron should advance and seize the territory, and our young protagonist, too, requests aerial reconnaissance from the Tatas. The two behemoths depart. Proceeding with their reconnaissance, the scene shifts to the entrance of the monastery, and the knight continued escorting the children. And there, mothers as slaves, and the child's mother implores for him to not harm her son. But the corpulent knight, Zavilaman, orders her to be silent, and tells her to be grateful she's still alive. The child continues weeping, calling for his mother, which enrages the knight. As he prepares to strike the child, his mother begs him to stop, but then he realizes his arm has been severed, and he's terrified. He looks behind him, and Eren Pendragon stands there, gazing directly at him with an icy stare. He wonders, is this Eren Pendragon? And he doesn't comprehend the situation unfolding before him. The woman beams with delight and declares, "Your Grace is here." Finally, she exclaims, our champion has encountered this wretch. Scum among the dregs. The two lock gazes, a silent confrontation. The rogue knight realizes he's ensnared, surrounded by Pendragon and his loyal retinue. He wonders why this confrontation with the infamous Pendragon, the ineffectual Pendragon, no less. In this moment, our hero draws his blade and brings it to his cheek, grazing the skin, creating a shallow cut. With commanding authority, he demands, "Who granted you permission to utter a word, you filth?" The man trembles, fear gripping him, and he turns to flee. He screams, ordering his men to eliminate Pendragon. They charge towards Pendragon, weapons drawn. And our group is there, drawing their swords, with another blade in hand, and he looks utterly enraged. And when the scabbard clatters to the ground, he just lunges at everyone, severing heads left and right. This leaves the arrogant knight utterly astonished, wondering what in the world is happening, and if this is truly the Pendragon he knows. But just as our protagonist finishes, someone intercepts his sword, which leaves Eren completely bewildered, and even his former fiancée is baffled by what's occurring, because it's essentially that knight, Sir Brandon, stating he's just lending a hand to the esteemed leader of the bandits. This is that rogue knight? He questions who the devil he is, and then Eren takes a step back, and this guy, he declares himself as Joseph Brandon, the commander of the Crimson Knight forces, from the house of Count Serut. And he has this condescending smirk that, seeing how much he desires to eliminate this brat, he's going to lend him a hand. But then Teresa inquires of her knight what this signifies. But Eren orders him to retreat, and Breno implores his lady, begging her not to be deceived by this incompetent fool who lacks everything required to become a count, and that he is more suitable for her than this piece of filth. And the portly man remarks, "So this is serious then?" Truly a conflict between the two. And he essentially seizes the sword from one of the deceased men on the ground, and declares he'll accept the knight's proposition. He immediately lunges towards Pendragon, both with their blades drawn, vowing to make him rue his underestimation of them. The young woman implores him to be careful, but our protagonist merely observes them with deep suspicion. With his own sword, he parries both attacks simultaneously and repels the two assailants. He asserts this won't happen again. A dwarf warrior should remain in the rear. She retorts, flustered and speechless, but he assures her he will handle the knight. Instantly, he declares he'll entrust her to the dwarf's protection, and to the goblin, who then suggests the human princess should retreat to safety, as she contemplates Sir Brandon's renowned strength, recognized even amongst the knights. Not to mention, there's also the brigand leader, and she wonders if young Master Eren will be all right on his own. But as she glances back, she observes his unwavering resolve. and a blush instantly creeps onto her cheeks. Accepting this, she departs. Then he instructs Tada to carry out his morning orders and enlists Serkilha. The harpy declares she's on her way. Meanwhile, the two scoundrels remark that it's too late to summon reinforcements. They claim he'll be deceased long before any aid arrives. But, facing them, he simply states, they certainly possess a knack for jesting. So, shall we propose a challenge? He shall be their adversary, and they may confront him simultaneously. Thus, Brandon will immediately engage him with utmost ferocity, advise him to abandon the notion that he can perpetually maintain that stoic expression indefinitely, and irrespective of the extent to which his demeanor has transformed, it remains immutable, that il a pratiqué le combat expertise, and that he possesses considerably more experience than this youth. And thus, the veteran skillfully evaded Brandon's onslaught and effortlessly trod upon his blade, contemplating whose experience truly surpasses the others, shattering it asunder, which leaves him utterly bewildered. But right behind him is our protagonist, who lands a solid punch directly in his face. The impact sends both of them tumbling, and the attacker is thrown back. Now, he aims his sword at them and boasts about battle experience. He inquires if he was referring to experience on the battlefield, and declares that he won't land a single blow with such rudimentary swordsmanship. The protagonist retorts that reading helped at the castle, and plunges his blade directly into the man's face. Only Brendo interposes his arm in an attempt to defend himself, and Aaron declares that he will repay his gratitude, begging him to accept it. Essentially, he severs the knight's arm, and after witnessing his severed arm, he erupts into screams. With Aaron stepping on him, he simply inquires why the man is lying there, and whether his duty isn't to escort Lady Ciros. Aaron's face is contorted with fury as he abruptly rises and commands the man to never again set foot on his territory. The man, weeping openly, flees. Aaron declares, one down, this portly fellow is next. He brandishes his menacing blade before our protagonist, prompting one to wonder if he's made a pact with the devil. But he states that a multitude of his comrades remain in this domain. He couldn't possibly intend to single-handedly slaughter them all. But Ari inquires if he's forgotten that House Pendragon boasts numerous exceptional soldiers. Reinforcements are already en route. He declares his task complete, with practically every knight at his back, and he proclaims that his soldiers will annihilate the remaining vermin that are left. And with a haughty gaze, he declares that the scum who betrayed Pendragon shouldn't even entertain the thought that they'll have a swift death. And that wretched knight immediately falls into despair. And so, essentially, he's trampled beneath the hooves of those knights. And after a period of time, they place that man inside the monastery, crucified, missing a limb, and their numerous enslaved individuals are being slain for sport. And our protagonist glances back and observes that they were imprisoned and likely subjected to narcotics. And when he glances in the other direction, he encounters a chamber filled with numerous corpses, which leaves him quite uneasy. And then the individual who is still alive, Aaron plunges his blade into his abdomen and states that he hasn't observed any villagers outside since his arrival, and inquires if he slaughtered them all. However, the man commences to apologize and plead for forgiveness for this. But Aaron retorts, "Forgive you? What do you mean?" It seems entirely fitting that someone like him, who acted as he pleased within his domain, should beg for his life. But the stout man questions if he intends to kill him. But Aaron states that he will not kill him. In fact, it's not even his decision to make, and he wonders what he's talking about. And so, he strides towards the group and commands them to heed this man's fate. He leaves the tormented villagers in their hands, which fills the man with utter terror. And so, Aaron instructs them to cook him, burn him, to do with him as they please. And with that, he sheathes his blade and departs. They begin to confer amongst themselves, and then concur on their course of action. Enraged, they lunge at the man. He trembles, consumed by fear, and desperately pleads for them to cease, to refrain. But they begin to pelt him with stones, to stab him, to inflict every imaginable torment upon the wretch. Finally, he expires. A pool of his own blood spills forth. Later, the boy wanders through the monastery, and so, he opens a door and enters a chamber where a statue stands. But concealed behind the sculpture lurks a figure wielding a blade. In that instant, he assaults Aaron. However, Eric reacts with greater speed. He needn't even unsheath his weapon and defends himself, flinging the assailant to the ground. Then he places his foot upon the fallen man, blade poised, directly upon his throat. Blood splatters across the statue. As he gazes upon it and utters the name Leona, the goddess of light, he inquires if she will lay a curse upon him for spilling blood in her presence, without a flicker of hesitation. And so, he declares that although he has been reborn into this form, granted another opportunity at life, he refuses to live a life of pretense, and he will accord others the reverence they deserve, and he will deliver unto the cruel the retribution they merit. This defines his character. Thus he removes the pendant he was adorned with, and proffers it to the saint. He declares this is his chosen path, and if she intends to condemn him, let her do so after he attains his ambitions. With this declaration, he departs. The scene now shifts to the northern village, and everyone commences to express their gratitude to Eren. The woman with her child professes her deep indebtedness to Eren. Eren suggests she feel free to reach out to them should she require any assistance with the reconstruction. She responds with, "May God bless your journey. Your Excellency, may all rejoice, and wish a long life to your end dragon." He turns and departs, as the pair inquire if he performed admirably, and if they might receive compensation. Tada asserts that he also toiled diligently, and Eren affirms his efforts. He will bestow a suitable reward upon them. He instructs them to await at the encampment, which fills them with elation. The night approaches, and remarks that Norton Village appears to be thriving for the time being. After all is said and done, they will finally breach Anchor Forest. However, Eren interjects, stating otherwise. There remains a task he must attend to beforehand. The scene shifts to a few days prior, within Conrad Castle, in Eren's office. He was conversing with that woman, and inquiring if what she's suggesting is that they can utilize the orcs of the Ancona Forest to their advantage, and she affirmed they cannot abandon the Ancona Forest, as they've sworn an oath to inhabit its territory, and their combat prowess is vastly superior to ordinary orcs, and if he could subdue them, it would be a significant boon. But he countered that orcs care for nothing but battle and slaughter, and if she truly believes they will assist them in achieving their ambitions. But she asserts that all of this hinges on him, and she believes he already possesses knowledge of the orcs, but they invariably follow strength, and for them, the pinnacle of power is embodied by dragons. But he cannot borrow the Souldrake's power to sway them, since Eren was deemed unworthy by the Souldrake. He has no alternative but to combat and triumph over them, to ensure their allegiance. And so, he speaks of the orcs, and contemplates this, but she remarks that this is anticipated from one known as the god of death of the battlegrounds, and she inquires if he has engaged the orcs in combat before. He recollects and affirms that he has. When he was still known as Raven Vareth, he battled a colossally powerful orc. But ultimately, despite the arduous struggle, he severed its head, and he states that he fought one when he had just joined the demonic forces, and he achieved victory. But it was an exceedingly challenging feat. However, if he were to engage an orc now, he could likely prevail, and she declares this is excellent. Thus, he will succeed, and she becomes utterly delighted, and proclaims that after vanquishing the Ongano orcs, they can effortlessly reach the mausoleum. He contemplates that she makes it seem remarkably simple. Now, the scene shifts back to them, journeying towards the orcs' location. Meanwhile, he inquires of her if they truly intend to transform the orcs into allies. He expresses his strong reluctance to accept this notion. Eren states that cleansing the Ancona Forest will be arduous, with their limited numbers, and to minimize casualties, they require formidable warriors. And Kiner speaks up, but if they engage the orcs in combat, they'll likely be obliterated. But then, a couple and Tada concur, agreeing that's precisely the situation, and that provoking orcs is tantamount to suicide. Tada declares he has no desire to perish. However, Eren expresses his disdain for this defeatist attitude, so devise a strategy for victory. Otherwise, I'll offer you as a meal to the dragon. Suddenly, Eren overhears a nearby dispute, and recognizes the voice as Brandon's. Eren wonders if he truly hasn't returned yet, but the couple proclaims, "This is dreadful." Eren inquires, "What is it?" He explains, "Those are the Ancona orcs. We gladly distrasaseran." But Kin, filled with apprehension, immediately advances towards them. And then the scene shifts to Sir Brendan and Princess Sayward, being encircled by orcs, while Brendan, terrified, implores them to cease. He already warned them to keep their distance. And Sirod remarks, "Just as I suspected, nothing positive transpires in his company." She recollects encountering him, missing a limb, and inquired about the reason for his actions. gesturing with her blade towards Duke Pendragon. It's akin to opposing the Empire itself. If he genuinely desires to rebel, then he can abandon his home. But he becomes exceedingly agitated by this and merely pleads that she not excommunicate him, adding that he still must escort her to the Searold territory. And she affirms, "Your sole duty is to safeguard me." And it's time he learned his place. And when they return, his father will determine his punishment. And he grows quite agitated contemplating this. And she departs, declaring their involvement here concluded. And now she desires to retire and rest. Then the scene shifts to the orcs confronting them, and the orc addresses the human, stating that he is brandishing his sword at them, and he inquires if he wishes to die. Meanwhile, Brandon, paralyzed by fear, is uncertain what to do. But then, our protagonist arrives and questions their actions, and the two gaze, bewildered by Aaron's presence. And Sard blushes deeply, observing him, realizing Duke Aaron has arrived. But Breno, he sprints towards Aaron, pleading for rescue. Aaron contemplates how someone like himself became a knight, and this is Achillean, informing your grace that venturing there alone could be exceedingly perilous. But then, the orcs discern they are Pendragons. Therefore, that lad can only be Aaron Pendragon. He expresses a strong desire to meet him, which makes Aaron quite suspicious. Then, our young hero notices that the orc activates an ability to terrify everyone. The aura leaves everyone apprehensive. And what's more, he realizes that the ability is fueled by their inherent fear of orcs. They can barely move or breathe. He states, "It's just as we surmised. They are formidable. It's time for a strategic withdrawal." But Aaron dismounts his steed. As everyone gazes in astonishment at his actions, he then approaches them and commands everyone to remain and to refrain from drawing their weapons. Now Aaron, confronting the orc, declares that he alone is sufficient to vanquish this green-skinned foe. This oddly elates the orc, for he will finally have a true battle. They then lock eyes intensely, and Aaron inquires if they are the anchor orcs. The orc advances and confirms that they are. Then Aaron merely observes him and discerns that the orc is attempting to exhibit his strength. Aaron then swiftly delivers a headbutt to his face, leaving everyone utterly astonished, even the orcs in the rear. While Killian deems this utterly dreadful, he's the one who initiated the assault, and after the orc collapses, the orcs behind him erupt in laughter at his expense, mocking him for suffering a nosebleed, simply because he was struck by a human. This leaves everyone utterly bewildered, and that gigantic orc denounces him as a wretch and demands to know what a Pendragon is doing there. However, Aaron retorts that he should be the one posing that question. According to the pact, according to the agreement that they forged with the Pendragons, they should be forbidden from exiting the forest, yet they have emerged from it. And the orc proclaims that this is all his fault. He was the one forsaken by the entity, the guardian of the forest, and those orcs refuse to yield to a weakling. And that's precisely why, even though they are obligated to obey the guardian spirit of the woodland, they won't submit to the one who forfeited equal standing with the guardian spirit by failing to forge a covenant with her. And he surmises that this entity, guardian of the forest, is referring to, it must be the Sodrake. And the arch states that's the reason they abandoned the woods to demonstrate bloodshed unrestrained as they seize dominion over the territory. And Aaron comprehends. They're consumed by a thirst for bloodlust. Unfortunately, he desires their strength, and he gradually approaches, stating that they would defy his commands. And that's precisely why he troubled himself to come here. And if he comprehends the reason, he lowers his weapons. And the orc, who becomes quite intrigued by Aaron, remarks that although he's merely human, he appears to be familiar with Orcish customs. He too releases his weapon. Aaron states that he is well-versed, and as long as his adversary refrains from wielding a weapon, one should not bear arms either. He must accept any challenge to a duel, which visibly excites the orc. And Aaron, equally enthusiastic, proposes that they should engage in combat, abiding by his regulations. And the orc exclaims, "Very well," and the two charge towards each other. And initially, Aaron manages to evade the orcs' initial assault. But consider this, it appears to be factual, that they possess superior combat prowess compared to other orcs. And if it were an average person, their bones would have undoubtedly been shattered. And while Aaron is airborne, the orc readies a blow against him, and Aaron retaliates with a swift kick. The impact generates a powerful gust of wind, leaving everyone utterly astonished. And when Aaron examines his foot, He notices a portion of his armor is fractured, and he has no doubts about the orc's strength. But he isn't as agile as the orc he fought previously, and so he remarks that this opponent didn't utilize his full potential. And the orc replies that it's quite evident. Humans claiming they perish instantly. He unleashed his full potential and is already scheming another attack on Eren. He claimed that was the reason he chose to utilize his full capabilities solely against adversaries capable of withstanding his blows. Eren simply declares it's time to confront him with his complete might, and Alker prepares himself to deliver a powerful punch. He states that Eren already knows this, and he assumed Eren wouldn't withstand a single hit. But apparently, he's a rather intriguing human. Thus, he lunges to strike Eren, but Eren evades the attack. However, his cheek is still grazed, and he realizes Eren has become faster. He then retreats a step as Orc charges towards him, challenging him to a duel. He commands him not to perish now. With a mighty blow, he strikes Eren. But the protagonist manages to defend himself as his former fiancée fears for his life. The knight, delighted by his suffering, realizes the situation is a catastrophe. Tada and the couple tremble with dread. Killen bellows his name. After the tremendous impact, everyone is bewildered, unable to comprehend what transpired. Where is Eren? But the orc contemplates, certain that his fist connected. Yet, a peculiar sensation lingers. Eren extends a smoky tendril and exclaims, "What the hell?" His body is completely rusted. He's only fought weaklings. Lately, he's been utterly battered. Even his forehead is bleeding. Sarad is deeply concerned for Eren, while the oxen revel in the combat. And Khan is extremely worried about him, but finds it unbelievable that he's still standing after enduring a blow from an orc. But he's never heard of a human triumphing over an orc in hand-to-hand combat. His grace is the cherished heir to the duchy, and safeguarding his life is his utmost priority. Thus, he commands his men to protect him. But Eren orders them all to halt and remain, declaring that this battle is solely between him and the orc, and he requires no assistance from them. Chris found him to be quite bothersome, but then he acknowledges his understanding, and so the elderly orc approaches and declares it quite magnificent to believe he remained alive. After confronting Karta, the most formidable orc of the Anchor Forest, he addresses the other orcs, remarking that if he perseveres, it's quite intriguing, and thus Eren states that this will provide excellent rehabilitation to restore his former senses. Now he proclaims it's time to go all out, while the orc asserts that he's the first human to survive after enduring his punch head-on, but it's merely a matter of time until he succumbs to his injuries. Eren gazes at him and inquires if he's serious, and if he isn't grossly underestimating him, simply because of something of his caliber. And so, he initiates the use of his regenerative abilities and claims it was merely a scratch. And just like that, the cut that he has on his forehead is closed. Porco is utterly astonished, noticing that the wound has vanished, and he states that the pendant truly is quite intriguing, and that now he has his full attention, and he immediately lunges at him to deliver another blow, which causes the entire ground to shatter. However, Eric manages to evade, thinking that to defeat him, he needs to unleash his full power on his vital points and on his back. He contemplates that to accomplish this, he first needs to restrict his movements, but the orc's thought process is as rudimentary as it appears. Furthermore, with his regenerative capabilities, this will be child's play. And so, the orc charges at him again, utterly delighted by this brawl. He questions Eren's previous audacity, inquiring why he's merely dodging now. Meanwhile, our infuriated protagonist calls him a tiresome orc and asks if all orcs from Ancona are only capable of swinging their fists. This enrages the orc, who demands to know if he's mocking them. He prepares to strike Eren, vowing to make him regret his words. But just as he's about to land a kick, our hero becomes elated, realizing he's fallen right into his trap. He successfully blocks the kick with his arms, but he's still struck, having dropped his guard. This causes Killing to yell out his name, but the orc declares that his arms are now useless, and that's the end of Pendragon. But Eren offers him a slight grin, uttering, "Finally caught you." He essentially seizes his leg, remarking, "Your arms are in great shape," but that this is the end of the anchor work. The large orc was certain that he had shattered his bones. He wonders how he's still able to move, but realizes he landed perfectly. That's what he wanted from the start. But our boy yanks him upward, then leaps towards him, making the orc think this is very bad. He won't be able to evade this attack. While Eric seethes with rage after his beating, Eren delivers a swift kick straight to his face. The impact sends several of the orc's teeth flying, and after Eren lands, the orc crumples to the ground, seemingly vanquished. Everyone is astonished, including Serge, who finds herself increasingly smitten with our hero. Even the elder orc appears thoroughly impressed by the display. Meanwhile, the others are elated, because that was utterly spectacular, and they begin to taunt the fallen orc, mocking him for being defeated by a mere human. They proclaim Eren's immense power. After the brawl, Eren dismounts his steed and requests his companions to tend his wounds, but Eren insists he is perfectly fine, and it's not as agonizing. As he inquires how he can utter such words, Eren scoffs internally and contemplates that the torment of regeneration surpasses the initial wound's pain. Indeed, well, he should be appreciative that this ability was bestowed upon him. To him, he observes his hand trembling momentarily, but post-regeneration he's completely fine. He advances towards the anchor orcs and states that he overheard his name was Karda. With the protagonist's aura, he simply demands obedience and declares it an order. The orc retorts that he recognizes him as the defeated one, and that following the victor after a loss is customary. Therefore, he will comply with any request. Still, Eren declares that from this point forward, they will commence preparations to seize the Ancona forest, and that he should assist him in this endeavor. First, Org is left completely bewildered. What do you mean? The forest? And why? Was he already rebuffed by the forest guardian deity? But then, Eren announces that he will unlock the mausoleum, which leaves all the orcs utterly astonished. He inquires if Eren intends to forge a pact with the forest guardian deity, and Eren confirms his intentions. He instructs them to proceed to Sudrik. There will be a legion of monsters so immense, they will grow weary of battling. And so, he asks if he isn't grateful for this opportunity, and that from this moment on, they will be able to engage in combat every day, which sends the orcs into a frenzy of excitement. But the orc leader interjects, asserting their imminent disappointment. These creatures pose no challenge, hardly considered opponents. He boasts they'll reach the mausoleum in a flash. And Killer suggests that if that's the case, they can take it easy. Then one of the knights presents his sword to Eric. Upon seeing the blade, the orc drops to his knees. Following his lead, the others kneel as well. The young man declares that the Ancora orcs must pledge allegiance to the Pendragons. He expects their unwavering dedication. The orc leader beams with pride at this proclamation. Meanwhile, Sard blushes deeply, gazing at our protagonist. But Brenda, witnessing this, becomes consumed with jealousy and rage. Night has now fallen, positioned midway upon a bridge, as Eren bids them farewell. Why leave soldiers behind? To escort her back to her homeland? Serut, you may return to your territory now. And so, she confesses she has no justifications. Eren gazes at that. Brandon, declaring the next time he raises his blade against him, it won't end with just a lost arm. This leaves the knight trembling uncontrollably. Even the orc stares at him, utterly enraged. It makes him terrified beyond measure. And so, Eren beckons the orc to accompany him. But as they depart, Seer deeply regrets her actions for breaking off the engagement with this man, and finds herself increasingly enamored with him. He's with Eren, leading the way. She believes if it's him, they'll undoubtedly succeed in unlocking the mausoleum. He's at the vanguard of everyone, with a protagonist's aura enveloping him. And that girl, observing this, blushes even deeper, while Brando becomes utterly infuriated, because he's consumed by jealousy. Following this, night descends, and in the mythical acronym, it's stated that they finally reach the Ancona forest, and everyone becomes somewhat apprehensive about the Ancona forest, as Eren declares that everything commences there, and finally, they can initiate the battle that he vowed to fight. Now the scene transitions to Soldrake, gazing at the moon and uttering. He arrives and states that since he's present, he should endeavor to locate the entrance to his domain. He, the individual devoid of a Pendragon's soul. And now, on the following day in the Vale of the Ancona forest, everyone is hunting numerous beasts, and the orcs are elated to be hunting monsters as well. But they say that slaying these serpents isn't even sufficient for a warm-up, and Karda declares he's utterly fed up with confronting such weaklings. Meanwhile, the knights are toiling diligently to combat those monsters. But our young man arrives to bisect one of those airborne serpents, rescuing that knight. and he expresses gratitude for Aaron's assistance. And Aaron replies that it's no trouble if he summoned Crado, he commanded, the Orcish mage. He claims he'll attend to the wounded, he reported. He acknowledged, understood. Don't trouble yourself with that, he urged. I've brought potent remedies, he assured. You can entrust that to me, he affirmed. Just then, Ken approached. Is your grace injured? He inquired. Imun karmat, and respunda. What's the status of the remaining troops? He questioned. Few monsters remain upstream, Ken reported. We can proceed with our advance, he advised. But our strength will be depleted if we engage. In a battle against demons, he cautioned. He glanced back and addressed Carda. How much further? He began. Until we reach Saudrake's domain? Sodrake, I'm uncertain, Carda admitted. But they'll spot indicators of the quarry. If they proceed a bit further in that direction, and the sole thing he's certain of is the existence of a cavern that links the guardian entity's domain to this locale. Aaron inquires if there are any perils he should be wary of en route to the quarry, but the orc states there are none. The zone remains Orcish territory, and those wretched serpents were merely seeking water. And Aaron remarks, good. Then they'll advance towards the quarry, and subsequently establish a camp there, and search for the cavern at daybreak. And if they engage in combat along the way, the orcs can handle it. Now they'll depart immediately, and both Killian and the orcs gaze at him, brimming with confidence. They declare their understanding and pledge to follow Aaron. Night descends once more. Aaron contemplates the moonlit sky. They halt their journey to establish camp, but a sense of unease washes over him. The place feels ominous. It's just a quarry. Yet, he inquires of Carda why the quarry is sealed. Carda admits uncertainty about the specifics, but according to his elder, goblins once mined there. However, rumors circulated of how all the goblins vanished simultaneously at some point, never to return. Aaron glances at the couple, but they claim they don't reside in the forest. So he's unaware, and furthermore, he's never encountered tales of goblins mining firsthand. He's far more adept at thieving than toiling, which astonishes everyone because he's genuinely quite forthright. And so, well, he approaches and inquires of your grace. What's the predicament? But Aaron advises that it's best they avoid this locale until sunrise, and the orcs can maintain their vigil in Paris. So he requests that they erect tents and allow the soldiers to rest. And he expresses his apologies to the fellow, but he will share the watch duty with him. And Carda simply states there's no issue. And so they finally establish camp, with 2 orcs already slumbering deeply, those behemoths as well. And in the heart of the encampment, only a lone sentinel stands watch, but he detects a disturbance and investigates the commotion, questioning the source of the din. But before he can react, a scythe cleaves through his chest. As he attempts to alert his comrades, he collapses, lifeless. The scene shifts to Aaron's tent, where sleep eludes him. A sense of unease pervades his thoughts. He ponders the perplexing disappearance of the goblins, vanished in unison. He mutters, they couldn't have simply vanished. Someone orchestrated their disappearance. But who could have perpetrated such an act? But he doesn't anticipate. A cloaked figure at the foot of the mountain, and it's a skeletal being. With its staff, it unleashes its power, and numerous skeletons emerge from the earth. They immediately begin to encircle the entire encampment. Without those numerous skulls, other grotesque creatures awaken and are already surrounding the entire camp. At this moment, our protagonist senses their presence and swiftly draws his twin blades. Emerging from the tent to confront these monsters, he suddenly spots a colossal, 2-headed demon charging towards him. He immediately engages it with full force. He wonders where they originated from and remarks, it's no surprise that those goblins have vanished, since they're all deceased. In this manner, he lands a precise blow upon the monster's head, and that impact jolts everyone awake, including Tada, who becomes instantly terrified, and the orcs go to investigate the commotion. They inquire, what in the world is that? And everyone sees only Eric, battling a colossal demon. He plunges his blade directly into the demon's eye, but even still, it remains undefeated. However, in this fashion, he executes a gash across its maw, severing the creature's head. And now Killian and Carda are at his back, and ask about the predicament. He then realizes that these are the goblins who toiled in the mines. The poster inquires about the manner of their demise. Aaron attributes it to a light. Lights are beings capable of manipulating the deceased as servants. Thus, he likely eliminated them all. It appears he aims to thwart them from pledging allegiance to the dragon and unsealing the mausoleum. He declares that, as they can observe, they are already encompassed. Therefore, they have no recourse but to confront them, for they will not dissipate until they locate the oath-taker. He states his intention to discover the true body's location and address it while they must procure time for him. Thus, everyone engages in combat. The orcs swiftly vanquish numerous skeletal goblins. While he discerns their overwhelming numbers, someone endeavors to obstruct their attempt to restore the former glory of House Pendragon. However, he won't allow them to succeed, believing his grace has undergone sufficient transformation. It's as if he's become an entirely different individual. Little does he know, he merely believes that perhaps he can achieve what his forerunners failed to accomplish. Furthermore, the current young master far surpasses the former one, and if that's the case, he will undoubtedly succeed in taming the white dragon and unlocking the mausoleum, restoring the glory of bygone days, and ensuring the prosperity of the Pendragon house, as it once was. He declares their era of decline is over. The Pendragons will undoubtedly rise again, and they are the proud knights of the white dragon. And he swiftly decapitates that demon. But then the goblins are assaulting the protagonist. While he's engaged in combat with the colossal serpents, they hurl several spears at him, and Aaron surmises that apparently they are targeting Aaron's life. And that's why he no longer has time to locate light. And with that, he alters his sword's trajectory, positioning the serpent in front of him, causing all three spears to strike it directly. And he wonders who in the world orchestrated all of this. But the downfall of the Pendragon family and the disbanding of the Varge house are all interconnected, and they must want something from them, since they are obstructing them, and he becomes quite enthusiastic, declaring, "All right, I'll assist you," believing he will reinstate this house's authority, even against your desires. So, feel free to try and stop him at any moment. And then, he's engaging in combat once more, against that colossal serpent, and cleaves it in two. He solely focuses on reclaiming the glory of House Vera. With his bare hands, he proceeds to the battlefield and contemplates that they've already confronted many. Although they are mere goblin skeletons, they won't be able to handle them all, since there are so many. But when he's momentarily distracted, a gigantic scythe swiftly targets his neck. And so, he begins to explain that a light is a sorcerer who sealed his own weapon to achieve immortality, because they transgress the natural order, and even the Empire itself. Although lenient towards magic and sorcery, it punishes them severely, and they are willing to resort to any means to achieve their ambitions. For this very reason, the Empire typically commands the demonic legion to handle them, since the Empire is indifferent to the survival of its soldiers. Consequently, there are substantial casualties, and the primary culprits are the lights. And he already possesses a recollection of when he was engaged in combat against one, and behind him there was that scythe, finishing off one of his comrades, and his head simply detonates. And as he glances back, he's oblivious to what just felled him. Then his gaze shifts to light, and he registers that light hasn't so much as twitched a muscle. He's bewildered by what transpired, questioning if it was sorcery. Suddenly, the other man bolts, exclaiming that specters are real, and he desperately wants to live. Yet, Light merely lifts a single finger, making a gesture, and as the man pleads for his life, he's struck from behind by that spectral scythe, and his head violently explodes. Raven had always believed they were mere folklore, but those chills, they are undeniably real. Light's most formidable servants, who can remain concealed, the phantom invisible to human eyes, a spirit akin to the Grim Reaper himself. And as he looks back, a scythe already targets his neck. He knows if that blade grazes him, he will perish. And now, how was it? He can sense the presence of that Grim Reaper. At the last moment, he manages to parry. A brilliant light erupts from his sword. He doesn't comprehend what just transpired. What is this blade? But he hears several voices urging him to compose himself. And the child speaks, "Your Grace, soldiers are collapsing without warning." He's bewildered by the unfolding events. He then notices that enormous scythe is hurtling towards Killian's back. He seizes Killian's arm and yanks him, rescuing him from certain death. He asks, what in the world just happened? Well, he just thinks this is all a bloody mess. The specters have an unnerving aura, so those who've never encountered them before won't comprehend. They'll be slain before they even realize it. These phantoms won't vanish unless dealt with using the light. And what's worse, there isn't just one. And if it escapes, all the soldiers will perish, powerless to do anything. and he just stares at all the wounded. But he considers that if he can't handle the light now, they'll be overwhelmed by their sheer numbers. And Tada and the couple, he has excellent night vision, but they can't search for the light like this because they're petrified. And so he thinks this isn't the demonic corporation. Therefore, he cannot simply abandon them. He must devise a solution. But just then, the orc mage activates his power, and a brilliant emerald light begins to envelop the entire area. He places a hand on Aaron's shoulder and declares that it is now his turn. Aaron gazes at him as the mage proclaims that he is in dire straits. He will lend him his strength. And now, he can behold the power bestowed by the great earth god. And so, numerous roots begin to unfurl throughout the entire vicinity. And in a sudden instant, those roots ensnare the monsters. Then, they crush them, and a colossal tree rises amidst everyone. And Aaron just calls him a complete idiot. If he could use magic, he should have done it sooner. But the orc retorts that's nonsense. It's a powerful incantation that requires extensive preparation. Unfortunately, that's not the end of it. He explains that this spell can only be cast once. This will be his one and only opportunity. He needs to locate light while the spell is still active. Aaron strains his eyes, searching for any sign of light. He scans his surroundings frantically, but then he glances behind him and finally spots him at the base of the mountain. After confirming light's location, the mage declares he'll somehow handle the remaining skeletons. He urges Aaron to proceed. Aaron breaks into a run towards him, and then Karta is vanquishing several of those skeletons. But Aaron, on his back, only calls out his name and says that Leech is up above. And so Karta comprehends what he's attempting to do and tells him to come quickly. He makes a foothold with his hand, and Aaron leaps upon him. And in this manner, Karta propels him upward towards where Leech is. And with his twin blades, he immediately moves to strike Leech. But with his lock, he manages to parry both of his swords. And Aaron inquires, "Didn't you want my life? And here I am, right before you." And he only contemplates that certain spirits also came up there. And with that, only the skeletons remain on the ground. It seems all his forces will soon reach their limit. He needs to finish this quickly. And the Lytic is enraged. He's already activating his magic. Multiple colossal skeletal hands erupt from the earth, but Aaron shatters them with ease. And just as he's about to strike, immense forces surge forth to hit him, but he narrowly dodges at the last moment. Realizing this is a dire situation, the specters are shielding Licht. He retreats, declaring it's too perilous. He can't approach this way. But then, Licht unleashes another spell, a fire incantation. This gigantic fireball hurtles towards Aaron, yet he manages to evade it. Confused and disoriented, he notices that Licht has sealed his escape route with flames, and the phantoms have also advanced up. And this Leech is far more astute than he anticipated. And so, he's encircled by those specters and the light, and they're already targeting his heart. But the weapon he was wielding begins to shimmer, and numerous azure flames begin to emanate from his body. And this wight becomes apprehensive of that power. And those flames, azure flames, begin to envelop Aaron's entire form. And that cerulean flame inquires as to his identity and states that they possess a kindred spirit. However, it will await him. Therefore, he must demonstrate to it when he reaches the culmination, this enigmatic soul. And the one communicating with him was the dragon. And Aaron recognizes its voice and utters its name, Odrak. And thus he radiates all that power because of the blade. And when he opens his eyes, surrounding them are what seem to be dragon wings, and the Sudra's might that is bound to him. This leaves the elite deeply apprehensive. And then he discerns that he can now perceive the specters. And these are truly grotesque beings. He remarks that this is the first time he's witnessed one, and the phantoms are advancing upon him. However, he unleashes the aura of his blade, and with eyes ablaze and wings extended, he immediately assaults the wraiths. Effortlessly, with the inferno of his sword, he vanquishes them. He scoffs, thinking a child's play, and then proceeds to engage the elite. Now, the elite has nowhere to escape, and so the protagonist, with his blade, embeds it firmly into the elite's forehead. He declares that it is finally over. Then, he gazes at the elite, consumed by the incandescent flames of the sword, and with Slive's form dissolving, his staff subsequently crumbles as well. All those skeletal goblins collapse to the ground, and a message declares that the skeletons have ceased their movement. The orc mage proclaims that the Lord is dealt with light, and with that, even the goblins' corpses begin to disintegrate. The mage explains that this is due to their leader's demise, and they dissipate into mist. Meanwhile, atop the mountain, our protagonist gazes at the sky and observes all those souls illuminating the clouds. After descending, he realizes they've suffered significant losses amongst the knights. His companions mourn the fallen, while he weeps profusely. But Eren doesn't even shed a tear, because he's an incredibly stoic boy. And after that, they inter the deceased. And thus, they return to camp to rest. And the protagonist, in his tent, was meticulously cleaning his blade. But he succumbs to slumber. When he begins to experience a flashback of when he received a missive, and realizes that these are the recollections from that day when he obtained this correspondence from someone, and afterward, he was already being incriminated. But he professed his innocence. This is erroneous, and that it was merely a misunderstanding and everything was a fabrication. But subsequently, he is incarcerated. He only expresses remorse for his father, his mother, and his sibling. But he believes he must cease these reminiscences. Yet he continues to recall when the changes enhance the vocabulary, making the dialogue more sophisticated and engaging while retaining the original meaning. Using stronger verbs, more descriptive adjectives, and formal language elevates the overall tone of the subtitles. He was encircled by a throng of nobles, gazing upon him, and the severed heads of his family members were positioned before him. And he was there, weeping, while he was raving. And now, a recollection of Eren emerges, who only pleaded with his father not to perish, declaring that he would become a dragon knight, and that he would be a valiant one, a truly exceptional dragon knight. Therefore, he implored his father not to die. And after these memories surface, which are seemingly interconnected, he awakens in a frenzy, drenched in a cold sweat. But then, he becomes enraged and storms out of the tent, unable to slumber. And so, the orc inquires if he's still awake, as it's quite late. But Eren tells Krata that after everything that has transpired, he's still on watch duty, and he can rest too. But the mage said orcs are resilient. He'll be alright. Besides, there would only be more casualties if he left this to the humans. And so, our young man gazes upon the inter. Krata remarks it was a grueling battle, and Eren declares this blade saved him. The mage merely observes it, as Eren proclaims this sword, the cherished grieving widow's blade, granted him the strength to defend against the specter's scythes. And it was the flames of Sodiare that Rock inquires if he speaks of the deity of the forest guardian. Eren confirms the blade possesses Sodiare's power, which can perceive all things, recalling the moment his eyes opened, with that power of the Sudra, which is bound to him. And he caught a glimpse of the phantoms, while pondering that the white dragon knows he isn't Eren, but rather Raven. Yet a memory of Eren surfaced, now intertwined with his own recollections. He contemplates why he dreamed of Eren, and a throbbing pain begins in his head. The mage inquires, "What's wrong?" But Eren only glares at him, seething with anger. The mage probes, "Why are you so furious?" But Eren simply mutters, "It's nothing." The reason for his foul mood? Sleep eludes him. A concerned voice asks, "Why haven't you rested?" But Eren remains silent. Then he confesses, "I had a nightmare." The mage, sensing his reluctance to elaborate, simply nods in understanding. Dawn has broken, and everyone is poised to depart as they gaze intently at the forest. And Karta expresses a foreboding premonition about, and the mage concurs with his assessment. He states that observing the scene before them, their odds of a safe return have dwindled considerably. And as they behold what lies before them, Atorofli gloomy locale, enveloped by a shadowy aura, Clean declares that the presence of the monsters is already far more potent than that of humans, and if he senses something there, it implies its existence. Then Eren speaks up, asserting it can only be the mausoleum. He recollects the dream he had previously and becomes intensely enraged once more, believing that the southerner awaiting Eren requires his strength to exact retribution for the tragedy that befell House Varge. He must confront the dragon, or heed its call, and he recalls an incident involving that dragon on the battlefield. Thus, he swiftly draws his blade and surmises that he has somehow been reborn as Eren. He begins to recollect all that former power and believes the southerner must possess some knowledge. Therefore, he commands everyone to prepare to enter the mausoleum. Now, they venture into the cavern, where the mausoleum is likely situated. Inside, numerous crystals shimmer, many and ancient. The feline detects a scent, strains its ears, and declares with certainty, "It's here." Meanwhile, He exclaims that this aptitude is truly remarkable, and Aaron states that it's indeed the Orcish intuition. They can perceive the atmospheric currents and locate water sources, and their sensitivity is ideally suited for this scenario. As they arrive, they observe something peculiar. He inquires of Crado, "What is that?" The mage replies that he sensed something, and as he gazes forward, it's a spirit. Since no one had previously witnessed spirits, they're utterly astonished. And now he arrives at a radiant waterfall. The mage declares that there are aquatic spirits in this location. He asks, "What do you mean by aquatic spirits? And are they dangerous?" But the mage assures him that they are nothing of the sort. However, this cavern, it possesses almost no life force, and it's a unique location, inaccessible, due to the divine protection of the Earth's great deity. They shouldn't have ventured here. He contemplates this, and Kira inquires whether they should depart. But Carta stated, there's a stairway concealed behind the cascade. Perhaps that's the egress. Aaron gazes intently at what lies beyond the waterfall and remarks on a gleaming object within. It resembles a dish. Grata doesn't comprehend his words, but then he notices the water transform. Suddenly, they're bewildered by the unfolding events. Aaron is utterly astonished. What manner of turtle is this, he wonders. The mage declares that is the spirit of the water. If she's already charging at them to attack. As a mage, I'd say she must be trying to safeguard something, and Aaron wonders if there's some kind of treasure there. But the mage says that he observed something amidst that waterfall, and that must be what she's protecting. And although previously there wasn't this narrative of safeguarding the great earth god there must be something there that caused the spirits to oppose them. And Aaron said that apparently they want to eliminate them for the protection of the treasure. And the mage replies that it seems so. Meanwhile, our boy becomes quite apprehensive about this, but he doesn't point his sword at the turtle. And everyone becomes anxious about him, going alone and unarmed. And so he approaches, traversing the water, and implores him to remain calm. He brandishes his blade and commands the specter to compose itself. And just like that, the might of the sword pacified the phantom. Then a gentle shower descends, and our hero stands there looking dashing. A passage materializes within the waterfall, and he spots a shield. The shield bears the Pendragon emblem. Kira then hoists the shield and declares it must be a treasure. It is undeniably a magnificent shield, and it mends the wounds of its bearer. It even heals the injuries of the soldiers. El questions if this is truly happening, but the mage assures him it's a positive development. He forced the spirits to retreat. He then comprehends what was discussed yesterday, the power of the widow's lament sword, and El just stares at her, uncertain of what it signifies. He confesses ignorance as to the reason, but he sensed something and it simply occurred, and the creator remarks that his countenance appears unwell. And Carta states that then, that was the might of the forest guardian deity. But Killian becomes utterly enraged, proclaiming that all of this belongs to the Pendragons. And Aaron concurs. The power of Sudric is the power of the Pendragons. In other words, it's not your power. And he once again experiences the recollection of Aaron's father's demise. And he becomes deeply infuriated by this, but is certain that he is the Raven Watch. Thus, after traversing for a time, he arrives at the mausoleum's entrance, and he announces that they've finally arrived. This is the mausoleum, the domain of the Sodrake. Now, they stand before the imposing structure. Aaron's blade begins to radiate an ethereal glow. As the knight inquires, why is the widow's lament behaving in such a manner? Aaron responds that it's reacting, and this undoubtedly confirms it's the mausoleum. With that, he brandishes his sword toward the mausoleum. A sudden detonation erupts from the center of the entrance. They question the origin of the emanating mist. But as Aaron observes, a figure emerges from within, approaching him. He cries out, mistaking it for a knight. However, as the figure materializes, they are baffled by its appearance. El is utterly astonished. Yet, in an instant, he recognizes him as the corpulent figure. Fatty Pendragon, the spectral being fixes its gaze upon him. Everyone wonders if that's the ancestor, the portly Pendragon, and why he's present. But the protagonist becomes contemplative, muttering that he's a transparently corrupt individual. He bears a striking resemblance to a phantom. But moreover, why does he recognize this man's name? And then he experiences that same recollection of Aaron's father's demise. And thus, he comprehends that these are Aaron's memories. And in this instance, Gordon was Aaron's father. And so he raises his blade, and a brilliant luminescence appears in the heavens. And they are bewildered by what it is. but when they gaze upward, they perceive the silhouette of a dragon against the moon, and they're astonished by the spectacle. And the orcs are awestruck by the dragon. And when they reveal their horns, the monsters tremble with dread. But when he reveals his eyes, Eren exclaims, "He's finally arrived!" And now the Sodra stands before them, landing just behind Gordon Pendragon. Now the two confront our protagonist, and Kinha remarks, "This is magnificent." The orcs murmur, "Is this the guardian entity?" But the protagonist remains silent, fixated on the Sodra, and then he hears a voice inquire, "Who are you?" causing Eren to tremble to his core. He instantly glances at the corpulent figure who was staring, brandishing a sword. And so, Gordon demands, "Who are you?" Then Kilia, "Do you grasp what's happening?" asks, "Did Lord Gordon just speak?" But the Lord protests, "That's impossible. He's merely a phantom." And Eren reflects, it's just like before, when he encountered Eren Pendragon in the Lobation Meadow. It was the same inquiry questioning his identity, essentially the entity that spoke previously and the one currently speaking now. It was neither Eren nor Gordon, but rather the voice of Soldrake. And it is he who is currently communicating with him. Then, Souther inquires once more about his identity, and they become utterly astonished, gazing at Eren. The boy exclaims that he is Eren Pendragon, but Souther observes him and draws closer, while pondering the unfolding events. However, the dragon declares that he is not Eren, and he cannot believe he's deceiving his sight. He will inquire once more as to his identity. Thus he begins to experience recollections of when he witnessed his parents' demise. In this instance, Eren's father, and later, when he was cast to the demons, and ultimately slain by his commanding officer, who was orchestrating everything against them. He begins to suffocate, and struggles to speak amidst the immense pressure, and fails to comprehend why his head is throbbing so intensely, and feels as though it's splitting apart. He contemplates his true identity, while the Swadra glares at him with this overwhelming force, and then his companions inquire about his well-being, and the Swadra, gazing at him once more, questions his identity, but our young man becomes frantic, and struggles to articulate properly. He recalls his time as Raven Varith, all the atrocities committed against him, but he doesn't grasp, because his memories are incessantly flooding back, because he refuses to relive them, and the recollections of when he was thrust into the demonic form, and subsequently had to confront numerous beasts, and ultimately his charge to safeguard Eren Pendragon. In this he comprehends that the dragon is displaying these memories to him, and it's a Souther who inquires once more, "Who are you?" And he, utterly distraught, is uncertain of what to articulate, but fragments of Eren's surface, and he perceives the Duke's spouse and the corpulent Duke himself, and then her cradling an infant, who was Eren, and he discerns that it's not him, but Eren, who is frolicking with the knights, and narrating tales to his sisters, later weeping at his father's deathbed. And when a depiction of a knight astride a steed, and that indeed is Eren, and immediately following these recollections, he commences to expectorate blood, which leaves everyone apprehensive for his well-being. But the colossal dragon still looms before him, and inquires once more as to his identity. And the protagonist, hemorrhaging, murmurs that he is Ravenvar. But then, he recollects awakening as Eren Pendragon, and beyond that, he was deeply concerned for himself. And subsequently, his two sisters came to visit him, both Eri and Mia. And also when Eren's mother embraced him, and soon after, when he encountered these grotesque creatures, and then battled against the orcs, and when he stood before that accursed, corpulent man, accompanied by his knights, and he contemplates that these are his memories. And his companions continue to implore him to persevere. And Killer declares that they must safeguard Lord Eren, even if it means their demise. As the orc declares they have no alternative, the orc mage halts that proclamation, and inquires if he intends to defy the guardian deity. He retorts that they clashed, and he triumphed, therefore he is his comrade, and if circumstances persist, he will perish. But Eren continues to hemorrhage, and finally he comprehends his purpose and identity. He rises, addressing Soldrake, as the dragon confronts him, now braced against his sword, before Soldrake. He proclaims that he is the rightful heir to the Pendragon Duchy. Eren Pendragon bellows with all his might, and this dragon is astonished by his declaration, and our young protagonist is completely battered. But in this moment, Gordon, who had been gazing at him with utmost seriousness, finally cracks a smile, and his spirit dissipates, while Eren remains perplexed by his appearance. And so, the Sodra lifts its head and unleashes a mighty roar towards the moon. The force sends everyone reeling, utterly bewildered by what's happening, for the roar is deafeningly powerful. Then it ceases and approaches Eren, declaring the oath fulfilled. Eren Pendragon and also Raven Vareth. It concludes by saying that someone like him will succeed the Pendragons. And finally, both Raven Vareth and Eren Pendragon, they successfully breached the mausoleum and forged a pact with the White Dragon, Sodrake, an act that will completely upend this world. And following this, his companions move to assist him, but he implores them to halt and cease their worry, for he is unharmed. He declares that the oath has finally been fulfilled, and he has been chosen by the Sodrake. This leaves them momentarily astonished, but then joyful, they erupt in celebration, exclaiming that Eren is the chosen one, and the future of the Pendragons is secured. The orcs declare that from this point forward is unified with the guardian deity, and this is a momentous triumph. Carton proclaims that he is the only one capable of defeating them, but then Souther raises his head once more, and Eren is bewildered by the unfolding events and inquires about what transpired. He's informed that a guest has arrived, but when he gazes out, he initially mistakes them for avian creatures descending from the heavens. However, a moment later, profound fear grips him, and everyone else also discerns the true nature of the spectacle. As they observe, a multitude of dragons emerges into view. They commence encircling Sodrake and Eren. Meanwhile, our protagonist remains incredulous at the sight of 6 majestic dragons that fix their gaze directly upon them. As they descend and encompass them, Tada and the couple begin to tremble with apprehension. Our young hero remains perplexed by the unfolding events, but the voice of one of the imposing dragons inquires whether this is the queen's new contractor. This query instantly startles Eren, causing him to gaze intently at the dragon, and Sodric confirms, stating, "Indeed, it is Miliar," and declares that he did not summon them. Then why, he inquires, have they arrived here? He adds that his oath with the Pendragons has no bearing on their presence. Suddenly, another dragon from behind interjects. Not this time. This is Souther, who reveals his name was Guji. He asserts that they have come because they are obligated to, and that the queen should be aware of the reason. Souther then gazes at them and questions their authority to inquire. The dragons exchange glances amongst themselves. One dragon approaches her and states, "However, I perceive something more within this human that transcends mere aura. Rather, it encompasses both auras of the demon god and the dragon god. Both auras reside within this human." At this moment, the colossal being lets out a deafening roar towards them, which once again terrifies all of Eren's soldiers, and the dragons appear quite astonished by this. And now, the behemoth confronts them and declares them unwelcome intruders. She commands them to depart from her territory immediately. She orders their retreat, speaking with the authority of the Dragon King. And when Eren looks, he doesn't comprehend what she just uttered. What does she mean? Dragon King? And they understand. Another one approaches and states that they will be leaving today. However, should these humans ever return to this land, everything will become clear. With that, they begin to take flight and depart. Meanwhile, Carta inquires about what just transpired, and Kazuri replies that it seems they were in conversation, as the mage explains that the dragon's voices can be perceived by those who are communing with them. He discerned her voice through Lord Gordon before the oath was undertaken, but now they could detect nothing. And Eren contemplates that perhaps he was the sole individual who could perceive it, but the Souther's voice truly ceased after the oath was fulfilled. But setting that aside, he reflects that there exists 6 dragons, a dragon king and a demon king, and there are numerous enigmas he remains unaware of. But perhaps the dragon queen possesses knowledge, and he muses that she must know, because he was resurrected as Eren. And then he approaches and inquires of the Sodrake if she could lower her head, because his neck was growing weary from gazing upwards. This utterly astonishes her, and she responds that if that's the case, there's a more suitable method. And with that, azure flames envelop her form, and her spirit begins to dissipate. Everyone is bewildered by the unfolding events, wondering if she has vanished. But then, an intense luminescence momentarily blinds all present. Shortly thereafter, Eren opens his eyes, and as everyone gazes around, they inquire as to the whereabouts of the Sodrake. But a voice declares that he is precisely there. Eren was looking skyward, where Sodrake's head was positioned. But as he lowers his gaze, he observes something undergoing a transformation, and it's the Dragon Queen in her human form. And so, she approaches them with these magnificent wings, utterly breathtaking, And this is the Dragon Queen, Sodrake, who leaves everyone completely astonished in that moment because they can't believe what they're witnessing. And even I was stunned by the Dragon King's appearance, or rather, the Dragon Queen's. And after being utterly bewildered, they're finally heading back home while Azad, who accused our boy on foot while he's riding his horse, but that orc in the back asks Killian if he comprehends what they're saying. But Killian hesitates, questioning why he's being asked this. And if he wants to know, he should just go and inquire himself. But he becomes quite agitated, stating that he cannot do that. And the orc mage explains that the anchor orcs, cannot approach the guardian deity of the forest so readily, easily. I wanted to mention that even if he did, he wouldn't be able to comprehend their conversation, since they are unable to perceive the Sodrake's voice. And for some inexplicable reason, they also cannot discern their own lord's voice. But he contemplates that he's a dragon, metamorphosing into a human, and he's never encountered this before. And simply observing them, he remarks that she's quite beautiful after all, which leaves the orc utterly bewildered. Meanwhile, the orc mage states he won't elaborate on the matter. They warn that if caught by the gaze of the Sodrake, your body will be paralyzed with fear. The scene shifts back to the dialogue between the soldier and Aaron. He inquires about the identity of the 6 dragons from earlier, and they appear genuinely discontent with their oath. He doesn't comprehend why they were quarreling. She simply states that it's something only time will reveal. He remains silent, struggling to grasp her implication. But then, he tells her that she revealed his past as Raven to him once more. Therefore, she must know about his enigmatic demise. And also regarding Bertholdt's pronouncements. And she undoubtedly possesses knowledge concerning these matters, because he returned as Aaron. Yet she continues to assert that time will reveal his rationale, which leaves him quite exasperated. And he erupts, gesticulating towards her, declaring that this is the sole phrase she utters, and questioning why she can't immediately divulge everything to him at once. But she retorts that he undeniably speaks excessively, and the Pendragons seldom converse with her, which makes him quite suspicious of this, inquiring what the devil is wrong with her. And he presumed that by merely making the oath with her, he would finally comprehend something, but in the end, he still doesn't understand a damn thing. However, at this moment, he senses something peculiar, and when he notices, gazing upwards, there's a monster descending to devour him and the orc, and Kira already bellows his name. Realizing it's a colossal demon, Aaron unsheathes his sword, but just as he's about to strike it, Sodra, with a mere flick of her wrist, obliterates the monster, ripping out its neck. Everyone is momentarily stunned, gazing at the gruesome spectacle, understanding that it happened faster than they could perceive, and essentially, she sees the beast's flesh and locked eyes with me. Then, she opens her mouth to devour the demon, leaving Aaron's soldiers and his new monstrous companions terrified. Wilhelm remarks that even in this human form, she still doesn't appear human. Despite being strikingly beautiful, she definitely doesn't behave like one, and Elle just stares at that, watching her consume the demon flesh. After a moment, they erect their tents for a night's rest. The soldier, perched atop a tree, gazes at the heavens. Our protagonist approaches her and utters her name. When she turns, he hunts down an animal for them to share. Following that, he expertly butchers the creature and proceeds to cook the meat over the fire. The act leaves her perplexed, and after a while, he presents the cooked meat to her, which greatly astonishes her. He explains that when she is in human form, she should consume food in this manner, demonstrating the proper way to eat. And so, she learns and begins to consume her food in the precise manner he described. And she declares that he truly is a simpleton. How intriguing. And he, gazing directly at her, states that he is indeed a fool. However, he is also a raven. This leaves her in deep contemplation. They remain locked in a gaze for a moment, and our young lady proclaims that she will cease discussing the past, since she won't comprehend it regardless. And this is something that frequently causes him to inquire if the meat is not to her liking. This takes her quite by surprise, observing the casual manner in which he addresses her, completely unperturbed. And then he adds, by the way, there's something he wishes to ask her. But then she speaks, leaving him perplexed by her meaning. He's utterly baffled by her words. She offers him a subtle smile and suggests he call her Soul from now on. He's rendered speechless, registering her smile. It dawns on him that even dragons are capable of laughter. He utters the name Soul and inquires about the dragon god and the demon god. Her response remains enigmatic, Time will tell, she repeats cryptically. Irritation flares within him once more, and he raises his voice at her again. Following that night, Eren and the others finally return. At his castle gates, a line of maidservants awaits, eagerly anticipating his arrival. Inside the castle, his mother and sisters, the maid, and the butler rush towards the balcony to witness the arrival of Eren and the others. His mother becomes overwhelmed with emotion, declaring her immense pride in her son. Meanwhile, Lindsay contemplates how deeply concerned she was after witnessing his departure. However, she's relieved he returns safe and sound. And so, everyone erupts in cheers, proclaiming the return of Lord Eren. Duke Pendragon. He strides forward, his people encircling him. Close behind him, Asudric walks in his human form, astonishing his sisters and Lindsay. Even the monsters are present, which further surprises everyone. The orcs also accompany them. Finally, Asudric soars above Eren, leaving the butler utterly bewildered at the sight of a goblin, a harpy, and an ogre. And why are these devils here? And who in the world is that winged woman? His mother gazes intently at the woman, and then she discerns the being's identity. Our young hero speaks for all to hear, drawing his blade, declaring that the crest-bearers have triumphed, and today, the dragon will once again stand with them. Looking directly at her, leaving his family's servants utterly bewildered, completely perplexed. Then, the jewels on Drake's forehead begin to shimmer, and there it goes, partially transforming back into a dragon. After that immense flash of light, they look upward, utterly astonished, realizing that hovering above Eren is none other than the dragon, Drake. And she commences flight above Pendragon Castle, as everyone exclaims about the grand feast to come. Now, with nightfall upon us, numerous fireworks illuminate the sky. Amidst the banquet, numerous noble families gather, and your sister sits at the table, conversing with Lindsay. The maidservant remarks on the festival's massive scale, and how it's her first time witnessing such a spectacle. Eren speaks up, stating that this is to commemorate the alliance between your brother and the White Dragon, and the parents and neighbors' €100. Influential figures are also present, but besides you glance around and wonder where the Lord is, and there's our protagonist, approaching Drake, who is seated in her human form, gazing at the heavens. He inquires of her why she isn't attending the festivities. Addressing her as Soul, she registers his presence and states that it's irrelevant whether he's Eren or Raven. But hasn't he already divulged too much to her? This leaves him in deep contemplation. He expresses his utter bewilderment, and she retorts that, as a Pendragon heir, he should be occupied with the celebration. But he counters that greeting guests is certainly a laborious task, and she undoubtedly possesses extensive knowledge of human society. She remarks on having been with the Pendragons for an extended period, yet she's never encountered a dragon attending a feast, and he inquires why she's saying such a thing. She even manages to assume human form, and she simply stares at him, not quite grasping what he's saying. And she states, just as she suspected, he truly is different from the previous Pendragons. At that moment, she abruptly takes flight, which startles our protagonist as he watches her depart into the sky. And when he glances to the side, several girls are rushing towards him, exclaiming that there he is, the Duke Pendragon, and they eagerly want to hear how he formed the pact with the dragon. This makes him quite flustered. Meanwhile, besides choking, while sampling the guests, this elderly man remarks on her beautiful physique and inquires if she would desire to be his mistress, which makes her quite uneasy. But when she glances to the side, she spots Eric surrounded by a bevy of women, and they remark that they've never encountered anyone who vanquished an ogre in hand-to-hand combat, and he's genuinely quite charming. He becomes visibly flustered, and one of them introduces herself as Mabel, who is affiliated with the chamber. Giovanni's son is a member of House Gold, and the other woman becomes quite agitated by her speaking, declaring that she isn't even a noble, merely a merchant, and she proceeds to flaunt the jewels on her hand, and inquires if she wasn't aware that House Goldman is solely responsible for shouldering the Empire's economy, single-handedly responsible for carrying the Empire's finances, and she wonders if her house is capable of vending mithril jewels like these, which leaves the other quite agitated, telling her not to boast about it, and they bicker about who's superior. This makes Eren quite furious, and he recalls that argument. He evades them and stealthily slips away, believing they all desire to join them, but he doesn't want to be burdened by this. However, when he notices a commotion approaching him, it's that orc drinking with Killian, saying he only managed 10 and is already stopping. He's truly very weak, and the mage and the other monsters are there, toying with his younger sister. And the mage says it's minor Pendragon magic, and she's delighted watching the rabbit move. And after observing for a bit, the orc extends an invitation to Pendragon for a drink. But William interjects, stating that the Lord is engaged. He cannot partake at this time. Anderson offers them a sly grin. He approaches, assuring them that there is no issue. He won't allow him to be defeated in a drinking contest either. This greatly pleases the orcs. He continues to observe them intently. He notes their genuine merriment. They are enjoying each other's company over drinks. The festivities begin to wind down. After indulging in quite a bit of alcohol, Aaron makes his way to his chambers with Talentos. She offers him assistance. He expresses his apologies to her. He feels he has been a burden. She reassures him that it's all right. She observes how much he enjoyed himself, a stark contrast to his demeanor after his father's passing, and she's genuinely delighted by this. He inquires if she truly is. While stating it's his destiny, he asks, "Where is your mother?" And so, they proceed into the chamber. Upon entering, a line of women awaits him inside his quarters. He encounters all those women from before, which leaves him utterly astonished. He's baffled, unable to comprehend the situation. At that moment, a feminine voice inquires, "Do any of these please you?" This leaves him utterly stunned, seeing his sister and mother at the very center. She states, "You made a pact with the dragon, and therefore must produce an heir. This is your obligation as a Pendragon. Now, you must select which of them will bear your child." This renders them both completely speechless. He simply lets out a loud yell, inquiring what she's talking about, and observing all those women. He asks his mother if he needs to select one of them, and she explains it's an ancient custom. After the pact with the dragon is forged, neighboring nobles dispatch women to produce the heir of a Pendragon, and originally a student of the Serage was intended to be his bride, but since they are absent, she won't be able to fulfill that role, which leaves his sister quite tearful, lamenting that in the end, her sister Luna ultimately relinquished her engagement in this manner. And he himself becomes quite contemplative about this. But his sister implores him to calm down, because today numerous families, esteemed guests, as revered as the Sirid family, are present here. And one of them proclaims, "Indeed, that's correct. It was from the house of Palpux, those who inherited the bloodline of the very first emperor." This signifies that their lineage is more noble than the imperial family itself. Another interjects, "The commander of the imperial army resides in your very household. They possess the capability to mobilize troops at any given moment, and brute force is the most potent power in the realm." Yet another declares, "She's utterly foolish. The future belongs to those who grasp the intricacies of economics, and wealth is paramount." These women engage in a heated dispute amongst themselves, while Aaron merely observes them intently. His mother approaches and implores him to heed her words, but he inquires if he truly must select between the individuals in this chamber. She's utterly astonished by this declaration. Dejected, she murmurs that this is the Pendragon custom, and he states that he comprehends. Thus, he opts for Lindsay to become his paramour, which instantly astounds Lindsay and his mother, his sibling, and all those women are stunned by his decision. Furthermore, I begin to gaze at him, completely bewildered. But just as she was about to refuse, our protagonist urges her to compose herself, explaining that she always cared for him, and when he embarked on that expedition, she was covered in soot, and he was captivated by her valor, and ultimately made a grave mistake, and he must bear the consequences of his actions, which leaves him. It makes her blush instantly. She's realizing that he's concocting quite a tale, and he apologizes to everyone present for his silence up until now. But his mother assures him it's all right. He's a man after all, and the significance behind this custom is to ensure the continuation, the stability of his household. So he says he understands. However, those women only came because they learned of his pact with the dragon, and in this moment, they came skipping along. But when he needed their assistance, they weren't there to lend a hand. And the one who remained by his side for 3 years, without any ulterior motive, uniquely, besides being a hulk, leaves her blushing once more. And those prospective brides start to berate him, claiming she's merely a servant. But he casts a stern gaze upon them, and declares that such things hold no significance for it. Those who rely on prestige and their lineage are nothing but a collection of fools. This leaves them all utterly speechless, and his mother and his sister are quite astonished by his declaration. Embracing Lindsay, he adds that he already possesses companions, those who have supported him all this time, Kellen and his soldiers, the unparalleled orcs of Ancona, and the goblin, Kazal, and the harpy Tata. They accompanied him to the mausoleum without hesitation, and he places complete trust in them. They are his comrades, and he takes his mother's hand, inquiring if the pendulums have become weaker due to a reliance on alliances. This causes both his mother and sister to blush deeply. Lindsay, too, appears delighted by his declaration, and so he gazes at Lindsay and proposes that she become his mistress. This leaves her trembling with apprehension. She responds, "Of course, my lord." He embraces her, proclaiming loudly that from this moment forward, the maidservant Lindsay is now his betrothed. Following this, he returns to his study, where the lady approaches him. She remarks that it was a remarkable spectacle. She had always perceived him as a crude soldier, but ultimately, these were his true intentions, and he remains silent, absorbing her words. Then, he inquires if she is truly present. With the mausoleum unlocked, she responds that she yearned to gaze upon her descendant's visage once more. Before departing, she observes that he has transformed significantly since their initial encounter. However, even without alliances, his path will not be desolate this time. He declares he possesses a strategy, which astonishes her. He reveals that the Pendragons have reclaimed their dragon's potency, and there are numerous individuals eager to invest in them, and particularly in him, Raven. He aspires to gather individuals who will evolve into the heroes of the future. This notion visibly astonishes her. He continues his discourse. If he can sway those future heroes to become his devoted subordinates while they remain obscure, they could forge an even more formidable army, both domestically and internationally. She acknowledges his ambition, grasping his arm, inquiring if the throne is his ultimate objective. He recoils, forbidding her touch, labeling her a phantom. She then beseeches him for an embrace, but he simply commands her to cease. She retreats, claiming she was merely jesting. She harbors no further regrets. He remains silent, but then he utters, 6 dragons have arrived. While he was forging a pact with the sun, and, to his astonishment, she inquires if the other dragons have materialized. He confirms, stating they have, and the obsidian dragon declared something regarding the dragon deity and the demon god. And from the limited amount he's deciphered of the dialogue, it appears there's a rationale behind his reincarnation, just as Aaron and Baltai previously affirmed that everything is interconnected. Then, she stated that it was the initial instance. She had broached the subject of the dragon deity and the demon god, and she inquires if Soldier mentioned anything relevant. He simply replies that the sole utterance from that alabaster dragon was that time would reveal the answer to him. And with a smile, she remarks that he's truly getting along splendidly with her. He inquires as to what she's referring to. She retorts that he just addressed her as Soul, but he merely states that's how she requested to be called. He reminds her that she asked him to call her that, and they are the sole individuals with whom he can confide in about himself. But as he gazes upon her, the grandmother begins to vanish. He's utterly astonished by this. Weeping and fading away, she utters that she must now depart. Stunned, he implores her to stop, but she says that irrespective of his ambition, whether it be as Raven or Aaron, she firmly believes he can attain it. Simultaneously joyful and tearful, she addresses him as her beloved Pendragon, touching and caressing his face. He, in this moment, calls her grandmother, embracing her tightly in a heartfelt hug, which leaves her utterly astonished. And so, she closes her eyes and tells him that from this moment forward, he must carry on as Aaron, Pendragon, and also as Raven Vera. After that embrace and those final utterances, she vanishes like the wind, and in that instant, he feels a void, vowing that he will definitively obtain his aim. Dawn has now broken, and unexpectedly, a wedding is already underway. And it was in the year 314 of the imperial calendar that Aaron Pendragon and Lindsay pledged themselves as husband and wife. And now, night has fallen, and our Aaron sits upon his bed, when a voice from the window begins to speak to him, saying that he has chosen that girl, calling him contractor. And as he looks, the sun is there, radiant and beautiful, standing at her window. And then he inquires if she knew the rationale behind the feast. She affirms her understanding. However, she questions his selection of the maid. He explains that numerous obligations exist. If he were to enter into an arranged marriage, it would hinder his pursuits, regardless of his chosen partner. It's best to expedite the matter. Visibly taken aback, she voices her astonishment, interpreting his words as a lack of interest. Lost in contemplation, he remarks on her 3 years of devoted care for the ailing heir. Thus, he places his trust in her. Changing the subject, he inquires about her whereabouts and her abrupt departure that day. She utters a single word, Ria. He expresses confusion, seeking clarification. She points to the precipice behind the castle. There exists a stone statue of a dragon, and it's where she resides. One can swear an oath with the Pendragons there. And he inquires if she doesn't find it tedious being alone. She responds that it would be the same anywhere. No one can perceive her, regardless, but he counters that Lord Pendragon can. And she states that she's never communicated with the Pendragons until now, not even with Gordon or his ancestral clan. This revelation astonishes him. She continues, explaining they never desired her to assume this form. Thus, out of deference, she remained in Haya. He contemplates his grandmother's perspective. It seems she indicated that he interacted well with her. He recalls her manner of speaking, remarking on his loquaciousness. It's quite uncommon for the Pandru to seek her out for conversation. He simply gazes at her, observing, contemplating that she's remained this way for centuries. But then, she states that it's irrelevant whether he's Aaron or Raven. Ultimately, he is her contractor. However, he addresses her as Soul, and admits he cannot acclimate to the manner in which she refers to him. She's free to address him however she pleases, except in that way. This catches her quite off guard. She declares she will call him Rai then. This in turn astonishes him. He reflects that Ray was the name his elder brother used for him, and he becomes lost in thought about his sibling. Noticing this, she inquires if he dislikes her using that name, but he refused. He genuinely enjoys it, and she can address him by that name from now on, offering her a slight grin, leaving her utterly astonished. And then she returns a smile as well, remarking that he is certainly quite distinct from the other Pendragos who came before, flashing him another beautiful smile. She gazes towards the heavens and addresses Alex, the very first Pendrago. It appears your pledge will finally be fulfilled. After that day, the news that the Pendragos had forged a pact with the dragon once more became a proclamation known throughout all the lands of the empire, and numerous individuals discussed it, claiming their territory is the equivalent of a small empire. However, they only possess a mere 5 knights, and the other fellow on horseback states that if all goes well, they'll acquire land and a noble title. They inquire the lad behind them what his opinion on the matter is. Meanwhile, in a somewhat distant land, a man seated in a chair declares that not only the dragon, but demons and the Ancona authorities also pursue it. And that gentleman remarks that he's quite intrigued by Aaron Pendragon. And afterward, you won't journey to Castle Sarit. And Sarit's father asserts that in the end, they were made fools because that Aaron Pendragon forged a pact with the dragon, and he cannot even find repose now, which leaves his daughter deep in thought about Aaron, blushing intensely. In a faraway locale as well, a mage proclaims that Aaron Pendragon has forged a pact with the dragon. Another man states that for the world they envision, Aaron presents an impediment. An advertisement featuring Aaron Pendragon is incinerated. A man consuming meat declares that they should allow him to handle the situation. He gazes intently at the two individuals. The cloaked figure announces, I've been expecting you, the Empire's mad dog, the Demon Association's comrade. Talvin Balta, that accursed Balta. He offers them a subtle smirk. Dawn breaks after that day. Someone bids Lord Aaron good morning. The young man, securing his hair, expresses his gratitude. She inquires about his destination for the day. He replies that he's headed to Barith Gate to enlist soldiers. The scene transitions to Barith Gate, and Killian is there, bellowing at the others, demanding to know where their vigor is. It's only been an hour, and yet they're already in this state. The soldiers are utterly exhausted from their drills. Killian declares that if they persist like this, they will be incapable of fulfilling their obligations as Pendragon Knights. At that moment, our heroine appears before Killian, remarking on his apparent success and inquiring about the progress of the novice's basic training. Killian responds that they claim to aspire to knighthood. However, he suspects they possess more bravado than resolve. They lack the necessary determination. He states that this is the first recruitment in a considerable amount of time. Therefore, it's understandable they prioritize quality. And also, he inquires, isn't it his duty to discipline the esteemed commander of the cavalry? A comment that significantly inflates our Killian's ego, and he becomes quite elated, asking if they comprehend. The Lord expects a great deal from them, and if they grasp the significance, even if they must grovel today, they will etch this lesson onto their very being. And should they adhere to his instructions, they will undoubtedly demonstrate their potential to become a Pendragon Knight. The recruits ponder about what in the world that mustachioed scoundrel is babbling about. And despite being the leader of the knights, he was bested by the group. He contemplates how someone could be so remarkably skilled. As he reflects, realizing that recently, the new recruits, they're always causing a commotion about joining his desired knighthood, and the demon, dragon god, as well as what those 6 dragons spoke of. He's unaware of the schemes his adversaries will employ. Therefore, he needs to bolster his cavalry to prepare them for the impending battle. Meanwhile, the orc mage is perusing his magical tomes while tending to Aaron's younger sister, peacefully slumbering on his leg. And as he gazes skyward, he spots numerous griffins circling Soul Drake. As she strokes one of them, he surmises that Soul has emerged from her lair in Heya and is now collaborating with him. And those griffins are likely her subordinates. And it appears she's genuinely enjoying herself considerably more than before. And perhaps, just maybe, but at this juncture, her father-in-law notices something and beckons our protagonist, and he inquires, "What is it?" And she responds, "The knights have arrived, and these are those same 3 knights from earlier." They commence conversing with Killian and the newly enlisted recruits, inquire if those are the unaffiliated knights, and one elucidates to the other. Unaffiliated knights are individuals who solely rely upon, depend on their own weaponry, and traverse the globe. They are quite valiant and seasoned. And the fellow on the right remarks, "That sounds rather impressive." But the one on the left counters, "It seems they've caught wind of the rumors regarding the Spittergon's resurgence and have journeyed here to enlist in the knighthood." Killian introduces himself and Killian as Mark, declaring himself captain of House Pendragon's Knights, and inquires about the gentleman's origins. The long-haired man states that he is Red Polly, an unaffiliated knight from Evendel, who roams the land, seeking a worthy liege to serve. The other identifies himself as Barrio the Fighter. Typo removed. Ludum. He desires a place with formidable adversaries, regardless of whether they are real or for training. Killian inquires about the other gentleman, who is masked, and the masked man simply gazes upward and declares that he will not divulge his name. This instantly irritates Killian. The bald man urges him to disregard. He's always been this way, and not even they know his true name. And the long-haired one mentions they've only just met, and since their destinations were identical, they chose to journey together. Leo states he comprehends their reasoning. Thus, he surmises they desire to serve the Pendragons. The bald one confirms that's precisely their intention. They'd heard rumors that the Pendragons lacked a chief knight, and the long-haired man declares they would then become the sort of the Pendragon chivalry and gain wealth and renown as compensation. The bald man adds they are rescuing him from a predicament, saving him from a crisis. And the long-haired one states, there's no longer a necessity to instruct new recruits, which instantly infuriates the killer and the new recruits quite intensely. But then Aaron appears and confirms this to be true, astonishing them all. And he stated that, as unaffiliated knights who rely on no one but themselves, if they possess the necessary strength, their attitude isn't unwarranted. And he addresses him as Lord. And our heroine remarks, if he possesses the required capability, could he potentially train with them now? And he, with evident enthusiasm, expresses his understanding. Following that moment, the individual already engaged in training with Killian and the new recruits inquire if everything is all right with the mustache man, because his adversary is quite imposing, appearing strong, and the two lock eyes and commence their fight. But following that instant, Kira unveils his true power, disarming the bald man, which leaves the bald man trembling at Killian's strength. And then Killian already aims his blade at the other long-haired youth and tells him he'll explain. He assumes the youth also desires training, and the long-haired youngster draws his weapon. He commences battling Killian, utilizing his full might, but Killian effortlessly vanquishes him. He positions his sword directly at the youth's throat, leaving him utterly astonished. The new recruits are visibly delighted, and one exclaims that the mustached man is truly remarkable. While the 2 young men stand dejected in the background, Killian inquires of his lord what he thought of the demonstration. Aaron states that they are short-handed, and he should take them, but he glances at the masked individual and asks if he would like to attempt it. The masked man declares he has no interest, which greatly angers Killian. He's infuriated by the disrespect shown to the Lord, and Aaron simply gazes at him, seriously inquiring, "What is your name?" But the masked man states he has no desire to divulge. This further enrages Killy, infuriating him to the point of calling him a mongrel and demanding, "How dare you address the Lord in such a manner?" But with a single swift motion, The masked figure effortlessly subdues Killy. The masked man's actions leave everyone astonished, baffled by what he just accomplished. They wonder how he sent Killy flying with such ease. Aaron's suspicions are confirmed. This man possesses immense strength, declaring his desire to recruit him into his cavalry. As the masked man fixes his gaze upon Aaron, after the brief skirmish, the young man with the earring continues to stare defiantly. He once again insults the masked figure, calling him a bastard, but Aaron intervenes, demanding he cease his provocations. Drawing his blade, he declares it's his turn. The man inquires if he wishes to spar. Aaron questions if he's uneasy, being a prince's training partner. The man remains silent, his gaze fixed on Aaron, but our protagonist simply levels his sword and states it's a duel. Aiming one's blade at an opponent's head is how the Knights of Valves signal a challenge. This instantly unsettles the man. Visibly startled, he asks what he means. Knights of Valves? He questions. Aaron explains to his bewildered recruit that long ago, numerous kingdoms thrived in the south, in close proximity, a land where conflict was perpetual, a land of ceaseless bloodshed. The cavalry of this region were known as the Valves, and having been reared in such an environment, they were formidable combatants, each possessing the might of 1,000 horsemen. They did not even fear death, and were lethal warriors for their overlords. But they were merely legends, whispered tales, and this was the first time he'd encountered one in person. So how did Lord Aaron know about this? And Aaron was quite delighted, and simply assumed he understood as soon as he heard his voice and his intonation, and the blades he carried. He'd battled one when he journeyed south, with the Demon Corps, and he was precisely like the Val's Knight. He possessed a mace and a shield in his quarters, and even had a beast, and he was accustomed to fighting under any circumstance, and he persistently aimed his sword at him, stating that the Valve Knights never lower their heads to anyone but their superiors. Not even the Emperor can compel a Valve Knight to bow before him, and they rely solely on their own prowess and skill, and are exceedingly proud. It seems he arrived. They're seeking a liege lord whom he can serve, and inquires if he's mistaken in this. And that individual states he is incorrect. He's not interested in that. He was merely guided by the stars. And those two bystanders wonder, guided by the stars? As he explains, he only remained with them because they provided him with water. And Helio, you're left pondering, is that all? The people of Valves are seafarers and celestial navigators. Potable water is essential for them. And then Aaron declares that his astrology was accurate. He was guided there, to him, Aaron Pendrag, and he confronts him, stating that he's aware of this, and that Valves warrior asserts that for them, the Knights of Valves, things like status, wealth, bloodlines, and such are merely frivolous matters. He has already drawn his 2 blades. He proclaims that if Aaron desires, he should wager his life on it, and if he loses, he will perish. And Aaron states that he understands the rules of combat among Valves warriors, which instantly invigorates everyone present. And the long-haired extra, he says your stance is completely ordinary, and the guy wants to say your sword looks like it belongs to a common foot soldier. But why are you using that thing? And in that moment, Aaron charges towards that knight. Hugo left the 3 of them quite astonished. And that pompous knight simply thinks he's incredibly slow and already defends against his assault, throwing his sword to the ground and attempting to strike him with his other blade. But the moment he tries to hit him, Aaron dodges and attempts to strike him again, and manages to draw a bit of his blood, which leaves that knight quite startled. And the knight, who became somewhat enthusiastic about the fight, lands a clean cut right on Aaron's cheek, and persists in battling with all his might, which leaves everyone paralyzed by that immense struggle. And the shaggy-haired boy inquires, what in the world just transpired? Because it was incredibly swift. And while the assassin comprehends absolutely nothing of what occurred, Aaron informs the man that he nearly struck, and this assault typically succeeds against those wielding blades. He utilized the short sword in his left hand to disrupt his balance, and then counterattacked as he evaded. And if he hadn't managed to dodge, his head would have been sent flying. He is genuinely formidable, and the man simply stares at Aaron and inquires of what lineage he hails, and if he truly is a spoiled noble brat. Aaron declares that he's the same as him. He's slain countless beings, demons, humans, not indiscriminately, of course, but purely for survival. And the man expresses doubt, questioning how he could have killed those people. Aaron states that he detects the same scent emanating from him, the stench of blood. The man is utterly astonished by Aaron's words, and after a slight smirk, he draws both his weapons, aiming them directly at Aaron. None of the three are remotely surprised by this action, and Aaron remarks that he's utilizing both hands now and is finally taking this fight seriously. The mysterious, nameless berserker knight. And after that moment, the orc is yawning, grumbling that it's truly boisterous today. He can't even catch a wink of sleep. And the orc mage remarks that it sounds like they're brawling. Aaron's sister awakens to investigate the commotion. As they draw closer, they inquire about the unfolding events. But upon realizing the situation, they become quite alarmed, recognizing Aaron as the individual who is fiercely engaged in combat. And amidst the fray, the Valve's knight starts to become rather exhilarated. And Aaron notices this enthusiasm and the manner in which he's advancing on him. The orc mage exclaims it's astonishing. He's fighting on par with Lord Aaron. Just who is that swordsman? Meanwhile, Aaron's little sister trembles with fear, and he replies that's precisely what he wants to know as well. And the Valve's knight presses onward, lunges at Aaron with everything he's got. But Aaron parries the blow and counters. The announcer calls it a bluff. In that instant, he manages to deflect Valves's blade. But then, Valves, with his second sword, blocks Aaron's attack. The blow is stopped. Killian is once again taken aback. Aaron's sword is locked. Valves presses his advantage, charging towards Aaron with his second blade raised. Everyone believes it's over for him. But suddenly, our hero leaps, executing a somersault right in front of Valves. Valves spins around, anticipating Aaron's impending strike. But as he attacks, Valves parries the attack and immediately lunges at Aaron again. Aaron believes he's predicted correctly, that Valves is acting exactly as anticipated. He thinks he has Valves' strategy figured out. As our protagonist attempts to evade, Valves employs a clever deception. This feint leaves Aaron visibly concerned. As Valves exclaims that the true assault is coming from the left, our hero tries to block it, but fails. The blade inches closer to his neck. An orc shouts for Valves to cease, revealing Valves' maneuver as another bluff. The real attack is launched from the right. At the moment of the strike, our protagonist seizes Valves' arm. This unexpected reaction surprises Valves. Aaron admits, "You're truly impressive." And this soldier boasts that he, too, desires to be the one who undeniably refuses to lose. He'll attempt to land a forceful kick squarely in Aaron's groin. And Aaron, perceiving the impending kick aimed directly at his crotch, momentarily loses his focus. And the soldier seizes the opportunity to strike Aaron's supporting foot, essentially executing a sweep, sending Aaron crashing to the ground. But just as Aaron is about to fall, he extends his hand for support. And purely with the strength of his hand, he manages to deflect the soldier's attack, which leaves the soldier utterly astonished. And in an instant, Aaron is directly behind him, landing a forceful kick to his knee, bringing him down. And the soldier realizes that Aaron is truly formidable. And then Aaron, with immense force, immediately launches an attack. But the soldier manages to defend with both swords, and the two continue to wage a ferocious battle. The Hulk astonishes everyone with the intense fight, and those two knights are utterly amazed by the brawl, realizing that these two are true behemoths. The orc mage inquires of the other orc if he believes he could vanquish that human. And what he ponders is that he also attempted to combat that fellow, but thankfully he refrained. This Wellington then glares at him and declares that he should educate him on the vulnerability of wielding two blades. And that fellow inquired about the weakness he's referring to. And this Wellington kind of clenches his fist, leading me to believe he was going to strike him, and then simply throws sand in his eyes, which completely blindsides that guy. Astonished in that instant, both oxen were stunned by Aaron's action. And that fellow, realizing the sand is heading straight for his eyes, he takes a step back. And in that moment, he loses his balance. Aaron seizes the chance to strike him. And this Valves, witnessing this, releases one of his blades, which greatly surprises Aaron. And what he doesn't grasp is what kind of tactic this is. This guy is incredibly quick-witted. He simply let go of his sword. And the other ox is quite taken aback by this, because essentially he's going to utilize that maneuver to hit Aaron with a counterattack. But the instant he strikes our protagonist, Aaron makes a move, and in this motion already has his blade right at the Valves knight's neck, which astonishes the three knights, and the two orcs, and even his little sister up above. And it basically has a razor-thin cut on the neck of that Val's knight. And Eren is quite exhausted from the battle. He remarks that the Val's knights are indeed quite formidable, and if he didn't possess this blade, he might not have been capable of victory. And that Val's knight remains stunned by this fight. And Eren states that after all, it has saved him multiple times, perhaps even out of affection. And this Val's knight, drenched in a cold sweat, drops his sword and kneels before Eren, addressing Eren Pendragon, declaring him a true warrior. As for him, a Val's warrior, his name is Elkin Isla, and from this moment forward, he shall become your blade, to vanquish and crush your adversaries. This is your oath. And so, every training ground begins to rejoice in Lord Eren's newfound triumph, while Eren contemplates, realizing then he was Elkin Isla. And Eren continues to ponder this surname, Isla, and the others inquire, who is this individual? His moniker is quite renowned, but Kira states that it's the first time he's encountered this name, and the other two knights concur, expressing the same sentiment. But perhaps the Lord is acquainted? I remain quite astonished by this revelation. It's Kim Isla. He is known as the Stormbearer, the mightiest of the Valva's warriors. And in his previous existence, in a mere handful of years, he became renowned as the Southern Dragon King. And he was a member of the esteemed Orinx, and waged countless battles to demonstrate his worth, which caused his reputation to resonate throughout the entire empire. Despite currently being a person of no consequence, he will undergo a transformation. He is destined to be one of the future's champions. This is our protagonist. Kneel before him as well. This act astonishes everyone present, and Eren requests that he raise his head, Isla. For now, he is his blade, and Eren is his lead, and they are not distant from one another. The sole disparity between them is their role, and he desires him to serve as his companion, just like all of them in the past. Eren's younger sister is there, utterly adorable, being held by the orc mage, and then he widens his eyes and lowers his head, remarking that he is indeed quite intriguing. And those two other knights comment that perhaps they could conquer the world. Not him, Eren Pendragon. And the bald man states that he too will follow this man. After the battle, Sodric speaks with Eris. It's over, and the scene descends, showcasing their griffins. Witnessing this spectacle, the two knights are utterly astonished. Isla simply gazes intently at the griffins, and our protagonist calls her soul. As she descends, she stands before them all, accompanied by the griffins. She begins to stare them down, causing the three to freeze instantly. They wonder, what kind of pressure is this? And who in the world is this woman? And someone exclaims, that's the Soul Drake, the white dragon, which leaves the chap utterly astonished, wondering if the dragon in the end was actually a female. And what he doesn't verbalize is that this is something he also desired to know. And the long-haired fellow states he comprehends his meaning, that otherworldly beauty and divinity of another realm. I wanted to express that she is certainly stunning, but she is a being that exudes such dread that it paralyzes any individual who ventures near her, and thus she draws closer, caressing those griffins. And our lad wishes to introduce her to Isla, stating that she is his employer, the white dragon of the Pendragon, Sodric. And Isla gazes at her, approaching without hesitation, and he addresses her as the white dragon, she who commands the griffins, and she simply stares at him, and the fellow inquiring if that chap is insane for remaining so tranquil in the presence of a dragon. And the long-haired lad remarks that this is the extent of his capabilities, but Eren contemplates that it's not. He isn't mistaken. When he encountered the sun for the first time in his previous life, he was pressured just like him, and that's not something one can simply surmount. It was simply about possessing strength, contemplating enduring the might of a dragon. But this individual is distinct. The Elkin Isla, he is genuinely quite intriguing. He gazes towards the heavens, pondering what he shall henceforth expand upon. His quest will transcend the confines of his domain, and he shall seek those who attained renown in his previous existence. For instance, the one who possesses opulence, wealth that rivals that of the entire empire, the youthful entrepreneur of Freedom City, the revered Dorian, and she who erected a tower in southern Valvas and resides there. She also crafted a multitude of enchanted artifacts, an exceptional sorceress, Jean Albedo, and also a youthful 20-year-old who, with a mere few hundred troops, rallied all the knights of the north, the brilliant general, the evangelist, and possessing the recollections of his past life, is an invaluable asset, and with these, he can enlist those who will command the world of that era. However, at this juncture, or rather, watch closely, as that mage begins to play an instrument. And when Eren observes, the mage states it's a summons from the elder. And those crystals commence to gleam, and he inquires, "What is that?" And the mage explains that it's magic utilizing minerals and permits them to communicate across distances. And needless to say, magic is undeniably quite convenient. The mage states he will listen to the elder's request, and what he conveyed was that several humans have trespassed into the Anchor Forest, bearing weaponry. It appears they're a contingent of several dozen soldiers. This revelation captures Eren and the others' full attention. The mage continues his account, explaining that their leader appears to be adorned with an ogre helm. This instantly leaves Eren utterly astonished, inquiring in disbelief. An ogre helm? The orc questions if he vanquished an ogre and fashioned a helm from its remains, and if such a feat is even within the realm of human capability. Needless to say, if that is indeed the case, he must be a formidable adversary. Undaunted, and the drooler simply observes in silence. Meanwhile, Eric is consumed by rage, trembling with fury. He surmises that a man wielding an ogre's helm can only be one specific individual in this entire realm, that damn Baltai. And as he bellows the name, a shadowy aura begins to emanate from him, astonishing the three onlookers. They witness Eren's eyes ablaze with wrath, and following this outburst, Eren immediately inquires of Krat where this cursed individual is hiding. The orc reveals that the message was just received at the orc village. The scene now shifts to this village, where monsters already lie slain on the ground, profusely bleeding. Baltai declares that he has finally dealt with his pursuers, and these orcs are certainly formidable adversaries, but they're not quite as tough as the one wearing that helmet. And after that, the stream flashes back to a few days prior, during that pendulum announcement, and one of those guys was saying that they'd recovered the White Dragon's power, and are now enlisting new recruits and steadily bolstering their ranks. And Baltai remarks that they're now doing as they please with the place, even reinforcing their military might. And he inquires if that isn't an abomination, as this beast, and the other knights confront the monster head-on, and this monster questions who they are, but Baltai just shows him a mirror. And in that looking glass, the reflection of a cloaked figure materializes, and the hooded individual proclaims that the vaunted bow, arrow, and shield of the Empire, as long as he possesses these, he shall be the most formidable cavalryman in the realm. Essentially, he's bewitching these two behemoths, and following that, the knights and orcs have already descended upon the orc village, and these diminutive orcs commence embracing that orc maid, exclaiming that he has finally returned. They're even leaping on Achillean as well. And he remarks, "It's astonishing that the ferocious orcs are also children like this." And the other responds that even cubs of tigers and lions resemble felines initially. And Killian concurs, saying it's true. But when he glances sideways, there's a small child going to embrace Eren. When the child gazes upon Eren, he's radiating an intense aura of rage. The lad practically has blood in his eyes, and the child simply flees in terror. Kira mentions he's been like this for a while, and the orc states that after he heard the elder's news, he's possessed this menacing aura. Kira wonders if his imagination, the gentleman's back, emanated the presence of a dragon, and this orc tells Eren to stop frightening the children. But glancing the other way, that same child is also running from Isla, and Isla, who's only trying to be adorable, attempts to approach the child, but his deathly aura terrifies her, and the child bolts in fear. Isla feels utterly desolate. While these two simpletons ponder, perhaps he likes cute things. But just then, the elder orc emerges and states that he has arrived early, the new lord of Pendragon. And so, Orc inquires about the identity of this individual. The orc mage reveals that this is his father. But as the elder orc glances aside, he notices the soldier in her human form. He promptly exclaims to everyone, "Pay homage to the divine guardian of the forest," and everyone genuflects before her. And she simply tells Ellen that as long as she remains, it seems the conversation won't progress smoothly. So she will simply rest there, and Ellen merely says, "All right." But before departing, she addresses him as Ray and acknowledges his anger. However, if he is consumed by it, he will lose himself in the process. And Eren listens in silence. And at this moment, she simply ascends the tree to perch there momentarily. And so, Aaron gazes upon that elderly orc and declares that he is known as Aaron Pendragon. And the orc elder responds that he is then Gordon's offspring and requests that he please enter. And now, they're already engaged in conversation. The orc elder states that several dozen armed soldiers infiltrated the forest and also managed to evade his surveillance mat. And he only managed to detect them through their movements as they enter the woods. And the orc mage inquires if they are concealing themselves with magic. Perhaps they possess a mage. But the elder states that no, they merely had soldiers and a wolf. Meanwhile, he's certain they have the assistance of a mage. Crowdo declares that this is exceedingly perilous. And the elder mentions that warriors were also dispatched, a few combatants to handle them, but none have returned, which has left the big guy utterly infuriated. Eran contemplatas a masiva wolf, possessing exceptional combat prowess, capable of vanquishing an ogre, and adorned with an ogre's helmet. He's convinced this is Baltai, who commands the demonic legion through the forest. The elder states that it appears they've encountered the centaur tribe. The centaur tribe? Aaron inquires. What do you mean, centaurs? Arca is equally perplexed by the situation and questions why they would convene with those foolish equines. And Aaron contemplates the relations between the Pendragons, the orcs, and the centaurs, recognizing it's quite complex and long-standing. The centaurs formerly inhabited the Ancona forest, but when the Pendragons arrived, they permitted the orcs to reside there. And perhaps the centaurs despise humans and assaulted the orcs, who served as a defensive line for the Pendragons. Due to the hostile relationship between the orcs and the centaurs, especially since they're a martial tribe, the current dilemma is how he, an outsider, cannot simply interfere in this matter. Since nothing has transpired, he would simply leave them be, but he's unable to do so. However, who immediately flings open the door, proclaiming that the centaurs have arrived to attack. And when Aaron emerges from the cabin, he's bewildered by the unfolding situation. And Mikasa states that the centaurs haven't instigated any conflict previously, so why would they be acting this way now? In that instant, one of the centaurs launches an arrow at Aaron, but with lightning-fast reflexes, Erixu intercepts it just in time. And as he examines the arrow, he recognizes it as an imperial arrow, and he is completely baffled by what's happening. And why would the centaurs possess such an item? This fuels Aaron's rage even further, suspecting they've allied themselves with the despicable Batai. And the mere thought of this brings back the dark aura from before, which begins to emanate from his body. And he addresses him by name, but Aaron declares he will annihilate them. He's been anticipating this moment for a long time. He commands that no one be spared, and to eradicate them all from existence. Beams of light emanate from his eyes. High atop the tree, Butcher witnesses this spectacle, and Eric is enraged. He seethes, remembering the centaurs as ancient adversaries of the orcs, and they dared to forge an alliance with Baltai. Witnessing the intensity of Aaron's fury, Killian believes he's exuding that aura again. Following this, our enraged protagonist charges onto the battlefield. The two knights notice this movement, and Isla is also perplexed by Pendulum's action. Observing this, the three centaurs ready their crossbows toward Aaron. But Aaron, unfazed by the attack, simultaneously slices through all three arrows. This act astonishes the two horsemen, and just like that, Aaron, his blade is already positioned beneath the centaur. Isla is utterly taken aback, recognizing Aaron's incredible speed. And with that, our protagonist essentially severs the arm of one of the centaurs. The two horsemen are left utterly bewildered. But then the other centaur draws a sword and lunges at Aaron. And Aaron simply observes that they aren't even remotely intimidated. As he watches, the centaur is drooling, eyes blazing with fury. The centaur bellows that they have trespassed into his forest, and now, finally, he can annihilate them. And they have bolstered their ranks solely for this moment, which left him utterly astonished. And to act, they commence their advance, proclaiming that they will safeguard the woodland. The orcs persist in their defense, but fail to grasp the reason for such frantic behavior. He inquires of Crota if these imbecilic steeds have always been this way. Crota declares it's sorcery. They've all been mesmerized, exploiting the environment and their fury to subjugate them. With mind control magic, they're being compelled to surpass their limits, transforming into instruments of slaughter. Amidst the chaotic fray, he manages to hurl a centaur from behind, but is promptly kicked in the stomach, causing him to expectorate blood and collapse. The two horsemen rush towards him, inquiring about his well-being, while He believes the blow pierced his armor and fractured his ribs. It was truly a mighty strike, and essentially, those centaurs commenced their advance upon everyone there, while even Valves is encountering difficulties, grappling with a single centaur, and Eric is consumed by rage, persistently assaulting him without a thought. However, another individual emerges from behind, and, with a crossbow, he attempts to strike Aaron. But Aaron manages to evade it, and he becomes utterly infuriated, labeling him shameless. But he gazes upwards and implores Soul to assist them in dealing with these foolish equines. But she states that the centaurs and the orcs are both her offspring, and she cannot meddle in this conflict. This statement left him somewhat astonished, thinking this entire situation was utterly dreadful. He pictured Bataille once more, deeming him a complete and utter scoundrel. That dark aura emanated from him again, but in that instant he noticed something peculiar. A small child was sprinting, while one of those centaurs pursued her relentlessly. The weeping child was struck repeatedly, but Aaron managed to yank her away and evade the blow. The young child, whom Aaron had rescued, expressed gratitude for his intervention. At that moment, reality struck Aaron. He realized there were numerous wounded, and his forces were faltering. The village had been devastated. What would the indolent Aaron do? He promptly mounted a horse and addressed all the centaurs that they are mongrel half-breeds of human and horse, and thus they all commenced to fixate on Aaron. And our protagonist states he'd heard tales that the centaurs were prideful combatants, but to rely on weaponry of the humans they despise and target children is truly despicable, declaring that they are nothing more than a wretched tribe of half-horse abominations. They truly went to such lengths, but still haven't even secured the head of the enemy leader. He proceeds to trample upon the head of a centaur, proclaiming that their fallen warriors are weeping. And witnessing this spectacle, the centaurs become enraged by this action and promptly begin to pursue Aaron. And Aaron remarkably succeeded in luring all those centaurs with him. And Crater states that the Lord orchestrated all of this to draw the centaurs from the village. And the other one states that it's insurmountable for him to manage so many. Isla is utterly astonished witnessing the spectacle. She extends her arm and beckons a griffin. The griffin promptly descends before Isla. Isla is quite startled by this griffin. He turns his head and inquires of Soul if it was her due. She doesn't even acknowledge him, but the griffin attempts to communicate with him, and he comprehends the griffin's message. After sprinting a considerable distance, Aaron halts before the entire assembly of centaurs. He stands within the ravine, and one of them speaks, declaring that he acted as a decoy to rescue his army, and that he is a truly magnanimous lord. However, if he perishes here, the orc village will also be annihilated, and it was a truly foolish decision. Aaron calls them idiotic half-horses. They are undeniably weak. He's more than capable of handling them. But consider this. The centaurs are under the influence of a potent enchantment. The question remains, can he truly accomplish this? Their apparent leader, their commander, declares they will tear his insolent mouth from his face. They charge at Aaron simultaneously. Aaron finds himself surrounded. Suddenly, 3 arrows materialize directly behind him, piercing the chests of 3 centaurs simultaneously. Aaron is utterly astonished. He glances upwards and spots someone soaring on a griffin. And soaring above on the griffin is his companion, Isla. He fixes them with a resolute gaze. Aaron cries out his name. Isla declares to Pendrick that he vowed to become his blade and vanquish his adversaries. He directs the formidable creature towards the centaurs. Soaring upon the griffin, he leaves the centaurs utterly astonished. They exclaim that a griffin is a guardian deity. The griffin unleashes a deafening shriek. It circles menacingly above them, with an arrow clutched in its beak, and another knocked in its talons. It strikes the centaur squarely in the chest. It swiftly dispatches 2 more centaurs. Witnessing this spectacle, Aaron can only conclude that he is a griffin knight. Griffins are divine beasts in service to dragons. Despite their massive physiques, they appear to dance across the heavens. To those observing from below, and because of the power they possess, they are utilized for hunting with military applications and are exceedingly challenging to manage. And so, they hold knowledge from ancient times, and after a protracted period of rigorous training, the first griffin capable of being ridden emerged. After hundreds of battles waged by its chosen rider, he is a griffin knight. Witnessing the spectacle of Isla vanquishing another centaur, he perceives only the immense strength of his griffin knight. Contemplating his name, it's Isla and his moniker from his past life, the Stormbringer. a griffin warrior, and he offers a slight smile, stating his understanding. It's truly a fitting appellation, and the commander of those individuals, witnessing their demise, commands all troops to retreat, and they commence their retreat into the woods. Isla contemplates that they're concealing themselves amidst the thick, and if they venture deeper within the forest, the griffin will be unable to pursue them. They could recuperate and regroup, but as the centaur flees, an arrow pierces his leg. He instantly crumples to the ground. Behind him stands our protagonist, aiming his crossbow. He declares, "Imperial crossbows are certainly of exceptional quality, and undoubtedly worth considerably more than some half-breed, half-horse bastards of the forest." He inquires, "Am I not correct, Chief Centaur?" As they sit, wounded, they can only watch him approach. Our protagonist continues to advance, gesturing towards the beast, claiming that even if the agony subsides, he won't be capable of moving that limb, and adding, "I was infuriated by that." Meanwhile, Aaron retrieves his shield, the one acquired from the mausoleum, and aims it at the centaur. The general, under the influence of an enchantment, observes something utterly peculiar. His injuries are being mended, and the spell afflicting him is dispelled. As he gazes upward, his eyes lock with Aaron's, and he inquires why he assisted him. Aaron responds that he merely restored him to his natural state, and had he not recovered, he would have simply slain him. Then, he confronts him directly and declares he must reveal the individual who supplied all these weapons. That damn Baltai, where is he located? And following that instant, the centaur inquires how he's acquainted with that moniker, Baltai of the Demonic Corporation, and Aaron, aiming that beast at him, asserts that he's the one posing the inquiries here, and commands him to promptly divulge what transpired between the centaurs and himself. He added, he continues to gaze intently at Aaron, and then lowers his head, stating that he abruptly trespassed into the forest and proposed an accord to them, declaring that the Pedragon had reclaimed the might of the White Dragon, and were now enlisting soldiers to bolster their infantry, and it's evident they were orchestrating a scheme against their sworn adversaries, the centaurs. Then he revealed that supplying them with weaponry to combat Aaron, commanding them to advance and obliterate the orc village, reclaim Ancona Forest with the centaur's might. But the centaur countered, suggesting it might have been due to sorcery. After that, looking glass appeared, where the cloaked figure conversed with them, and that's when they relinquished all composure, succumbing to fury and hatred. He cannot recall what transpired afterward. Aaron becomes deeply contemplative. Then Isla descends with her griffin. She addresses him as Duke Pendragon, observing Aaron with a dejected demeanor. And following this moment, Aaron directs his shield towards the assembled centaurs, instantly revitalizing each and every one of them. The centaur chieftain is visibly astonished by this unexpected action. Aaron explains that it seems he can only mend their wounds using his own life force. Isla inquires why he chose to do this. Aaron declares that his true adversary is the one who incited them to violence, adding that those who cultivated these feelings of hatred were the Pendragons. Therefore, they bear the true responsibility for this conflict. This revelation further surprises the centaur chieftain. Aaron somberly admits his inability to resurrect the fallen centaurs. The chieftain acknowledges that, in the end, they perished as warriors of the centaur tribe, and that they would harbor no regrets. Aaron remains silent, his gaze fixed intently on the chieftain. The centaur then addresses him as young Pendragon, remarking that he is vastly different from his forebears. And I inquire if he truly believes that. Only time will tell. And the centaur inquires if he recalls what he previously stated. He truly is a capable and judicious ruler. Therefore, the centaur tribe, from this point forward, will forge an alliance with the Pendragons, which astonishes both of them in the moment. And he declares that to retaliate against the one who inflicted this upon us, he vows that they will not hesitate to collaborate with the Pendragons. He glances back and asks his people if they concur, and they affirm. If this is the elder's desire, then they will comply. And Ares states that he will then be relying on the tribe of the centaurs to safeguard the forest with a mightier cavalry, and henceforth they shall be comrades. And thus it was recounted that following the skirmish, that after the clash with the centaurs, a sensation of tranquility and serenity pervaded the entire Ancona forest once more, and the soldiers were mended. Then they dined and imbibed until they were satiated at the feast held in honor of peace. Except there in the corner is our Isla, deep in thought, gazing at the heavens. But when he notices two small children are drawing near to him, and one of them smiles at him and remarks that he was being very valiant while mounted on that griffin. They begin to clutch and embrace Isla, which makes him quite content witnessing this. And in another chamber, the elders and Eri are conversing, and the elder orc explains that it was a spell originating from a looking glass. Then El inquires if such a thing is even possible, and the orc replies that he doesn't possess sufficient knowledge to provide an answer on that matter. Krato then interjects, stating that regardless, it's an exceptionally potent and intricate enchantment. This form of mental manipulation and augmentation will only go so far as to sway them, something akin to manipulating the sentiments of numerous individuals simultaneously, all at once. The perpetrator of this act is truly a formidable sorcerer. El remains lost in contemplation over this revelation. Following this moment, he's perched atop the tree, simply gazing at the landscape and the soldier approaching him, addressing him as Rai. She inquires why he wears such a somber expression, and he asks her where she went, and if she was the one who bestowed that griffin upon Isla. And she stated that they merely sensed the presence of a griffin knight emanating from him. Aaron remarks, "Perhaps I've ridden one before, but for some undisclosed reason, he chose not to elaborate." She commented that humans are exceedingly intricate beings, and he wasn't overwhelmed by the dragon's wrath. He inquires, "What do you mean by dragon's wrath aura?" Contemplating that aura, which surged from him in that moment of fury, she explains, "As your contractor, your physique is capable of harboring a dragon's power, and the degree of command fluctuates depending on the wielder." Then he states that if rage consumes him, he won't be able to perceive the entire situation. He ponders what's right. There are still certain matters he doesn't comprehend, and he had forgotten due to his rage. But in his previous existence, he was once a member of the demonic corporation. This scribe was engaged in combat in the distant southern territories in the Sea of Trees with the Troll King, the most savage beast, and half of the demonic legion were obliterated in that conflict. But Baltai was also present. So, Baltai has been liaising with the centaurs. It's quite peculiar. And regarding the Battle of the Sea of Trees, what about the Troll King? What about him in his prior life? Raven Verith, where in the world is he? He became deeply contemplative about this, pondering what he said at that juncture, especially being linked to the downfall of the Pendragons, the annihilation of House Varge. And now, those who seek to obliterate the Pendragons. Afomsud, that they will endeavor to reach his birthplace, the location where his household forfeited its honor, now merely a domain of disgrace. The destination he desires is Sasuke, formerly the dominion of House Vard. And following this moment, the scene transitions to a fair-haired youth consuming meat, while numerous individuals kneel before them. Both of them, both Serd and his father, failed to comprehend why they had arrived in Serd territory so abruptly, and the young woman implores her sibling to cease. He is spoiling her disposition, and there's no need for him to finish everything. He states he was simply awaiting her completion, and inquires if he's not a commendable elder sibling, and if this doesn't bring her joy. This renders them both speechless. The long-haired boy remarks that there's only a single rationale for why he, the imperial prince, would journey here, and naturally, it's the adjacent duchy, the Pendragon Duchy, and its duke was a Pendragon. This further astonishes the two. He proceeds to assert that the Aaron he recognizes is nothing more than a feeble and frail individual like a worm, and he finds it incredibly dubious that after awakening from his coma, he forged a pact. The White Dragon inquires of them what in the blazes happened to that lad. The girl's father states that she encountered Aaron and instructs her to elucidate on his condition. She presumed he was unchanged, but upon her recent observation, it was as if he had transformed into an utterly different individual. He became audacious, yet simultaneously composed and remarkably powerful. The prince approaches her and remarks, "So, he has become a superior man than I," inquiring directly, gazing intently into her eyes, which leaves her utterly terrified. He begins to exude an aura and unleashes an uncontrolled laughter, astonishing everyone present. They perceive the formidable presence of this individual, the conqueror's aura, and the prince remarks that the pale worm is still charming women. Now he's genuinely astonished, addressing his sister as Ingrid, but she remains silent. He approaches Sariti and commands her to accompany him. Grasping her chin, he declares it an order. He inquires if that pale worm has overstepped a boundary. She only contemplates that she cannot refuse, since he is the second prince, the tyrannical Ianarago. Now, at the polite Pendragon residence, our protagonist has returned, and he asks What do you mean? The prince and the imperial princess are coming here. The butler states that the second prince, Ian, and his sister Ingrid are arriving imminently. Any second now. And he inquires, what in the world are those scoundrels thinking? The butler questions, what do you mean? Those blasted rapscallions, he retorts anxiously. Aaron doesn't comprehend his agitated response. His butler reveals that Princess Ingrid is his former betrothed, and the one who terminated the engagement was Ian himself. This revelation astonishes Aaron. He asks in disbelief. He had other fiancés before Savage? The butler is utterly taken aback. He inquires, were you unaware? But Aaron contemplates this and realizes that indeed his sister had mentioned something about it. He becomes quite apprehensive, recognizing the precariousness of the situation. A month following the Centaur incident, numerous new knights enlisted in his ranks, and Isla commenced training the Griffin Knight Squadron. They fortified themselves considerably. Furthermore, he attained remarkable control over the White Dragon's aura. The pendulum typically takes respite every summer. Thus, he could utilize this as a pretext to visit the village near Sisuk, where the Verith household was devastated, and seek those responsible. But the matter directly before him is causing him significant distress. He states that their motive for seeking him is somehow connected to the betrothal. But Maldomo professes ignorance and implores him to exercise caution, since the second prince is being designated as the future emperor. And within the empire, he is recognized as the tyrant. So, if somehow he were to provoke him, but El interrupts him, he instructs him to wait, as the second prince is being appointed the next emperor. And the butler states it's because the first prince's condition appears to have deteriorated. And El contemplates this. But then he comprehends something, pondering the name. Ian, the next emperor, it wasn't supposed to be Ian. The name of the man who would ascend to become the next emperor was Guffloy Arago, which leaves the butler completely bewildered. And El inquires of him if the first prince's name was Gofloy, but the steward refutes this, stating the boy's name is Sion Aragon, a moniker he's never encountered before. Aaron is bewildered, struggling to comprehend the situation. It's neither the name of the first prince nor the second. Instead, it's entirely unfamiliar. And just who is this Gallflor? The present reality diverges from his past life, and perhaps the two are intertwined. With this thought, he unleashes his draconic aura, which emanates from his finger, astonishing the steward. He declares that now he has a compelling reason to locate this prince, Sion Aragon. After a few days pass, the royal family finally arrives. Everyone is instructed to pay their respects. And so, Sion begins to radiate his aura toward everyone within Pendragon Castle, and in his presence, the servants fail to grasp the magnitude of his power. This man is of royal lineage, therefore they dare not raise their gaze. This is the formidable tyrant, Ian Arago. But Ian is momentarily astonished, observing an individual unfazed by his formidable aura, and not bowing before him, nor kneeling in his presence. Aaron remains utterly nonchalant, casually strolling in his direction. Ian lets out a slight chuckle. Now, with Aaron directly before him, Ian inquires, doesn't he believe his head is held a bit too high, addressing him as Pendragon Brat. But our heroine retorts, what do you mean? It's not as if you are the emperor. Ian is momentarily enraged, stating that he will be the emperor. The jest only begins to face him and lets out a sly chuckle. The individual who will ascend to become emperor is not. This leaves one astounded by what he's uttering. And our protagonist remarks, it's a shame, isn't exuding his draconic aura upon the boy, addressing him as second prince Ian Aragon. Now, with essentially two princes confronting each other, an epic clash might ensue, or perhaps not. And if you desire to know what will transpire, bestow many likes upon this video and subscribe to the channel. Let's strive for a goal of 4,000 likes on this video for me to deliver the next installment. And everyone, once again, I implore your forgiveness for this month having very few videos. But as I elucidated in the preceding video, I am undergoing renovations. But come January, everything will return to its usual rhythm. In fact, with a substantially increased volume of videos. And if you're inclined to provide financial support to the channel, you could become a part of our membership community. Simply click the join button below. And over here is a truly excellent video. Feel free to take the opportunity to watch it as well. And that's all, folks. I'll be signing off now. Until the next video, goodbye.